Okay, folks, can we get started? Can I welcome everyone to the meeting of the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee of Tuesday, the 15th of September. Can I ask if there are any apologies, and can we have the Sederunt, please?
Morning, Chairman. Apologies from Councillor Groom, and we're missing Councillor McCutcheon.
Okay.
19 present.
Okay, can we turn to item number 2, any declarations of interest? No. Okay, item number 3, which is the minute of the Economy, Environment and Infrastructure Committee meeting of the 14th of July. Are members happy that the minute is a true record of the meeting? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Okay, item number 4. Which is on page 11, and it's the Plan Environment Budget Monitoring Report, the regular report that we receive on the revenue budget. Can I ask the Director if there's anything he wishes to add to the report?
Thank you very much, Chair, and a very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is our budget monitoring report as of the end of the 31st of the end of the period, 31st of July 2015. It's fairly early on in the budget monitoring process. We indicate in the table under paragraph 3 that there are measures to be identified to the tune of £131,000 to ensure that we balance our budget at the end of the year, and the report indicates that we are confident that we're going to be able to do that. Appendix 1 indicates the budget monitoring itself. Appendix 2 is the progress against the agreed savings that we had to achieve in 15-16, and we have very few issues there. And the utilisation of policy development allocations is progressing. Happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks very much, Alistair. Can I open it up to members? Do we have any questions on the report? Ian?
Could I just ask where the 131,000 is likely to be found?
We give an indication on page 12 of the report. There are a number of measures that we are going to look at. A full analysis of planning fee income and building standards income. Planning fee income is definitely on the upturn, and we're very encouraged about that. On the building standards income, we obviously have quite substantial income coming in for the new acute hospital build, and we expect that we will be able to balance the budget on that over a full year. Now, obviously, that build is going to last more than this current year, and building warrant applications are coming in to the tune of 5 or 6 a month associated with the hospital, and we've profiled that income over the next 2 years. So again, we are satisfied and comfortable that we'll be able to balance the budget on that. We're also looking at an analysis of early retirement associated not only with our previous service reviews, but the current service reviews that are ongoing within the Council. And we're looking at the ongoing reshaping and restructuring of the department as we merge with DG First for the future. We're also looking at discretionary spend and a review of all other income. So there are a number of measures that we're going to be looking at very, very closely.
Thanks very much for that, Chair. Can I just also ask briefly under point 4, governance assurance, normally the CMT's been consulted about budgetary affairs. Has that been the case? Because it's not mentioned in the report.
Well, normally it's our own management team and the head of finance, and the head of finance is a member of the corporate management team. I don't think we put CMT in there regularly, but if that's something members just wish me to check and ensure, I certainly will do that.
Councillor Dick, just add that all the reports go to the CMT. So.
Okay, do we have any other members? Jim?
Thanks. It's about the hospital and the income from the build warrants. I would have thought we should have been looking upon that as a windfall opportunity rather than using it as a mechanism just to deliver a balanced budget. And I would have hoped that the Director could have assured us that there will be a balanced budget and that that will only be considered as part of our general or standard income, because it's not something that we can rely on year. And whilst we may get other projects that are major, that should be an additional opportunity to, like, if you like, to accrue funds rather than using it as a means of balancing our budget year by year.
Thank you, Chair, through you. Yes, it may be that we do get ahead of our income projections because of that, but that's why we've profiled it over 2 or 3 years to ensure that it meets the budget going forward. Obviously, we have a regulatory role as the Building Standards Authority, and because it's such a big project, part of our strategy is to employ somebody specially to be on site permanently to oversee that, and that will have to be balanced off against the income that we generate.
And we just go back briefly, I suppose then what I'm really asking is, taking aside the income from the hospital applications, can we be sure that there will be a balanced budget delivered, excluding that element of income?
That's the intention through these other measures to achieve that, because as you point out, we have to have a solid foundation going forward. We won't always have the hospital. So, very good point, Councillor Dempster. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Chair.
Okay, I've got Alistair and then Patsy.
Chair, thanks very much, Reid. As far as I'm concerned, sir, our building control service is very much a blue chip service. All the more gratifying, bearing in mind not so many years ago it was under the cosh. I take it that this is our struggling to meet fee targets, etc., is under no circumstances any reflection on that service, and I'm sure that the response I'll get in that will be in the affirmative, Chair, that it's not, in any way a reflection of the service. But is there any, notwithstanding our regulatory role, is there any way that we can, as a council, we can seek to address the wider economic malaise in this part of the region's economy, Chair?
So as we go forward, we have the new regional economic strategy, and through that strategy we'll be working very hard with all our stakeholders to regenerate the region. And hopefully through that regeneration there will be more planning applications, and then we obviously have to wait. There are many planning applications that may not manifest themselves into actual build on site, therefore we don't pick up the building standards income. But through our regional economic strategy and through the priorities of the current administration, we will work hard to regenerate the area with all our stakeholders.
I think it would be helpful if we could get our new school started as well, Alistair, so if you have a word with your colleagues up in Edinburgh to release that funding, we'll get on with that as well, and that would certainly put a lot of investment into the local economy. Okay. Okay, do any other members? Patsy, sorry.
Yes, thank you. I realise we've got the zero waste source segregated collection service later on in the agenda, but I just noticed here at 3.23 that it says that following the same approach as last year, the additional costs associated with the new segregated domestic waste collection, blah, blah, blah. I'm just wondering what the approach we had last year. Could you just remind me of that? And how we're going to deal with the problems we're going to face?
My apologies, through you, Chair. The overspend on the zero waste rollout in Wigtown was against the DG First account, because that's where the waste collection account is, and that overspend was covered off by the Planning and Environment Services budgets, because they hold the budgets for all the grants that we've received from the Scottish Government, and also the PFI Sinking Fund. And we also hold the overspend, the budget pressure that was approved by Policy and Resources of £400,000 to cover off the full rollout of the new waste collection system across the whole region. So that's how it was covered off last year. The overspend appeared in the DG First collection account, but it was covered by the funds that we had in PES for the zero waste.
And was that the sinking fund then that you referred to, or did it come from elsewhere?
The grant money received from the Scottish Government sits in the sinking fund.
Okay, any final questions? Okay, members can return to the recommendations on page 11. Are members happy to note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3 and 2.4? Okay, thank you. Okay, can we turn to item number 5, which is the monitoring report around our capital projects. Can I remind members, obviously this is a strategic committee, so if you've got any individual ward questions on those footpaths in your ward, please see officers at the end of the meeting. There's obviously a number of major strategic items we need to go through in this report. Can I ask the Director if there's anything he wishes to add to the report before members?
There is nothing to add to the report at this stage, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open up to members' questions? I've got Ian and then Patsy.
Chair, I'm asking your indulgence just to speak on behalf of Councillor Stephen Thompson, as there are no members of Annandale North Ward. And although this is a relatively local issue, I think it impacts on the recommendations, and I would ask you for indulgence to read out a statement regarding a road issue.
Happy to do that. I might start questioning on the actual whereabouts of the road, Ian, see how you get on, but that's fine. Quite happy for you to speak on behalf of Stephen.
I'll just read it as I've been given, and if you think it's something that should be taken up afterwards, then I'm quite happy with that. But thanks for the indulgence. Councillor Thompson writes that he would like to ask the committee to hear a representation on behalf of the community of Johnson Bridge, whose concerns about road safety are given very real concern, given the recent fatality in 2014 and other injury accidents and incidents since March 2013 meeting of the FES committee as it was then. The accidents were acknowledged at the Area Committee report of May 2015 and resulted in the Area Committee decision to ask for a review of speed limits on the where the B7076 passes through Johnson Bridge. The reality is that no matter how many houses are on either side of the road, as mentioned in 3.21 of this report, page 23 in the report, pedestrians have to cross the road to use bus stops within the village or join the road in their vehicles with oncoming traffic in both directions on the B7076 travelling at 60 miles an hour. Johnson Bridge community has repeatedly raised concerns and petitioned twice now for the speed limit to be reduced to 40 miles an hour when it passes through the village, with particular concerns about increased heavy traffic using the nearby lorry park and the fast southbound traffic from Beatnock that often needs to slow quickly to anticipate vehicles joining the road at the junction at that end, at the north end of Johnson Bridge. Community is only asking that the voice be heard and given more weight so the road can be made slower and safer for residents and road users passing through. Excuse me. Tragically, this is no longer an accident waiting to happen. And finally, I would ask the committee to consider amending recommendation 2.6 to recognise the work of officers to date following the request by Annandale and Eskdale Area Committee, but ask that the speed limit and road safety measures at Johnson Bridge be considered again, especially in light of the clear and sustained community concerns and recent road traffic accidents. And thanks very much for allowing me to make that statement.
Okay, thanks very much, Ian. I don't know if, John, do you want to respond to any of the points raised at this stage? Or
I can do so briefly. With regard to the accident record, this location hasn't been identified in our AIP trawl this year. It hasn't come up in the past. Obviously, probably not appropriate to comment on any details of the fatal accident that happened. We've not yet had the consideration of that through the Procurator Fiscal, so we're not really aware of the circumstances of that. Works have been undertaken, as is indicated in the report, to address the concerns raised by the Community Council and indeed modified to reflect the views of the Community Council, and they've been put in place. They went through the Area Committee, took 3 reports to get those agreed. So, there's been very full and extensive consideration of the issues that have been raised by the Community Council there. The speed limit issue, it's an unfortunate situation, but there are very few properties that front onto this road. There's only 3. It's a remnant of the A74, as members will be aware. Part of that is perhaps in terms of actually trying to change the appearance of the road. It's been left as a half of a dual carriageway. Some of the work that we've done is maybe try to make a change to that. But again, that's reflected in what the Community Council wished us to do or not to do. So, but there is no justification for a speed limit to this location, as the predecessor committee actually determined. And there hasn't been a change in circumstances since that time. Thank you.
Any other members want to come in on this particular point? Dennis and then Ian. And then I'll come back to you, Patch.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, this has been before the Area Committee on many occasions, and the Johnstone Bridge Community Council have expressed the concern that sooner or later there was a fatal accident waiting to happen. We now have had that, and I really think this needs to have some further consideration now when we get the full detail of that as a result of that, because it is a very fast piece of road. It is unfortunate how it sits and how difficult it is to probably get a speed limit on it, but I think we've really got to go back and have another look to see if there's a way we can do what Johnstone Bridge Community Council are asking, because I would hate to see another accident happening because of speed on this road.
Thanks, Chairman. I think Peter Diggle in particular, along with Stephen, has been involved with this as local Arndale North members. When I first look at this, you think, do we set a precedent here when it comes to, you've got Johnstone Bridge, if we were to implement a speed limit here, would it be a precedent? But the road runs between Beatwick and Gretna, and the Johnstone Bridge is quite unique as it stands, and particularly in regards to as far as I'm aware anyways, the bus stops being out on the B7076, sitting on the 60 mile an hour speed limit. If you go further down, you've got Kirtler Bridge, which again you turn off the road to get to the bus stop. You're within a 30 mile an hour speed limit. Compared to Fleming is safe because you're within a 30 mile an hour speed limit. Back in summer 2012, we went against the recommendations of the office at that time when it came to Annan, when it came to putting out a speed reduction limit as you enter Annan, it was from 60 down to 40. That's been implemented and has worked very, very successful, to say the least. Been well received by the local community in Annan and surrounding area. Works really well, and I think that in real terms there's a chance that we could be looking at something similar in here, reducing to 40 or 50 mile an hour. Maybe come back to that when it comes to recommendations, certainly as far as getting something worked up, what would the costs and implications be in regards to that, but certainly supportive in supporting the local community. They've got aspirations. I don't think it'd be over the top when it comes to costings or funding that from the council, so be pleased to come when we come back to recommendations, just to put something together and try to address some of the aspirations of the local community in that area.
Okay, anybody else want to come in on this particular point? No. Brian, do you want to?
Thanks, Chair. Just for clarity, I mean, Mr Howell on the one hand is saying that this matter has been dealt with and is now closed insofar as he's concerned. However, the result of the cause of the fatal accident could cause that to be revisited. I wonder if we can just clarify that, and if it's going to be revisited on the back of the fatal accident, I think it would be well guided any future measures that might be considered on the back of whatever the fatal accident inquiry comes up with as a cause and or remedy to the problem that arose there.
John, do you want to respond to that?
Just very briefly, the accident happened at a junction, involved a vehicle turning out of the side road. I'm not aware of whether or not speed is a factor in that accident happening or not, and I can't really comment further on that. The previous consideration included measurements of the speeds on that road, and indeed the further reports to the area committee included consideration in measurements of the speed on that road. If I recall correctly, they were of the order of about 50 miles per hour. So, it's an unrestricted road. So, in terms of the review of speed limits exercise, there was no justification under that. That originally started with a mechanism of looking at unrestricted length of the road, and any which had a high accident rate, a lower speed limit was an ultimate solution, but there aren't other accidents on this length of the road. Unfortunately, there's just one specific one at this junction.
Ian, you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. But, surely, forgive me, but I mean, if the fact remains that we don't know whether it was the speed that caused the accident, surely that's cause for further investigation.
Can I make a couple of suggestions? There's two things here. There's obviously the fact that some measures have already been taken recently, because obviously the recommendation wasn't just about the speed limit, it was about a number of measures around bus stops and crossings, etc. And obviously we don't know what the impact of those changes are yet, because it's obviously still quite early days, and we obviously still wish to hear if there are any lessons from the accident. It may very well be it wasn't a contributing factor, and therefore it wouldn't be appropriate to speculate at this stage. Could I suggest that actually, once we know the outcome of any reports on the back of the accident, and we've had an opportunity to monitor the changes that have taken place and the improvements that have already happened as a result of work carried out by officers, that we have a further report to Annandale and Estill Area Committee on the monitoring of those changes and any information we have as a result of the accident that took place in the road, and take it from there. Finlay.
Chair, is it the case that we can't make a decision to enforce a speed limit because it doesn't come under the Scottish guidelines of limit? Can this committee not decide, because of the overwhelming support in the community, that we can apply for a speed limit to be enforced? You know, we've got communities right across Dumfries and Galloway where there may not have been fatal accidents, or where communities are very concerned their safety, and you know, they maybe don't tick all the boxes. You know, how as a council can we address those fears in communities without having to tick the Scottish boxes? You know, we've got examples of, and I know it's out with this council, but Crocketford and Springholm, where there's overwhelming support for further speed reduction to be taking place. But surely as a council, we can, a committee like this, decide that there's overwhelming support for a speed limit in a community, and we can make that happen.
I've done it in the past. We went through a very detailed process in which we did that with a whole number of areas, and you know, and we have a process to go through. The difficulty is, you know, we didn't do it on an ad hoc basis. We go through that detailed process. There's always a lot of detailed consultation with the police that takes place, obviously, around these things. And this one itself actually came to this committee in the past as part of that piece of work, and we took a decision at that point, obviously not to amend the speed limit. So obviously there's a process to go through, and we've done that with a large piece of work for a range of roads. So yeah, there's no reason at all why we can't do that. But I think we need to, you know, the report indicates that there hasn't been any change since the committee made that decision. It may very well be that, and actually a number of improvements have taken place in the road around changes that have been made. And I think actually monitoring those changes and waiting to see if there is anything that comes in the back of the accident report might be the best way forward. At least you may have an evidence base for members to consider any changes further, because as things stand, there isn't really anything different from the report that came before members in 2013. But I mean, Ian, do you want to come in?
I mean, I think what you put forward as a suggestion is a fair point. The only thing I'd like to be added to that is that the area committee would get the chance to see what a traffic calming would look like, whether it's a reduction to 50 mile an hour, 40 mile an hour, and what the cost implications are to that, and any potential safety risks. Does that increase the safety concerns that are being raised in that local area? And they're vast, kind of, there's a large volume of the community wanting a speed reduction there, because I think it'll improve safety. Like say, it goes back to the crossing over the road, the bus stop, the accident, is fair enough, we'll find out what comes of that. I think if something was done with the driver error, it might or might not be. I think that's what's been mooted in the wider public. But in regards to it, it's a perception within the community that it is an accident waiting to happen. It's been mooted before, as Dennis touched on, before the accident happened, and then it came to fruition through under whatever circumstances it's come to. But I think it would be important that if we're going down the route that you're proposing, which I think is a fair way to go forward, that the area committee gets a chance to actually see if we reduce that with 50 mile an hour, or down to 50 mile an hour, down to 40 mile an hour, what does the cost implications look like, and what would be the added benefits in safety terms in regards to that? And the area committee could then reflect on that and come back to send it back up to the economy, environment, infrastructure, with a more informed recommendation, or it could actually finish it completely.
Certainly the reports that have been there in the past have been pretty comprehensive, and no reason why this one won't be comprehensive as well and deal with all these issues. Do we have anything more on that particular issue before we cover the rest of the report? Are members quite happy with that as a way forward? Okay, thanks. Okay, the rest of the report, any questions? Oh, Patsy, sorry, yes, we come back to Patsy, sorry.
Thank you. I'm just looking at paragraph 3.33, which is to do with the Kakubri onshore power supply, which I think we've had at this committee for the last year anyway, with various problems and delays and things. And I see we've got James McLeod here, who probably knows more about it than most. I don't know. But I've got three things. I just wonder why the cost of the project has gone up by 58,000. Is this the substation? Because I was at Community Council meeting the other night and they seemed to think that the substation's there, which I couldn't see it the other night when I went past, certainly. But, and I just wondered what the design issues are, because that should have been dealt with before, I would have thought. And that if you do want to consult with the Community Council, not the Community Council, the Common Good Subcommittee, we do have a meeting on the 7th of October. But can you just give me an update on all of this?
I'll start and James will correct me.
Okay. Thank you.
The substation for Kirkcudbright, it's to introduce the three-phase power supply to the harbour, and some of the work's taking place there. So I think you would notice the pillars in place for the boats to take the power off. And the idea was, and you're probably aware that the idea behind the project was to reduce the boats running the diesel generators, creating fumes because they needed power. So it was to give power to the harbour of a size and capacity that a number of vessels can use it for charging and for the operations on the harbour side. A number of locations have been looked at to get the transformer in place in agreement with Scottish Power to deliver the three-phase supply. And I know it's been an issue in terms of the locations that have been proposed, and we're working with colleagues in DG First just to take that design forward. We've had feedback from it's been to the Common Good Committee at least once that I'm aware of, and the location that was proposed wasn't agreeable, and we've revisited that. It has to be at a certain level on a plinth so that we can deal with the kind of flood risk of the harbour, so that there's no inundation when the water levels are high under kind of flood conditions. And the most recent option that we're looking at is actually as part of it's almost an extension to the harbour office at Kirkcudbright, and that will be reflected in the fact that the design costs are changed, because effectively we're looking at extending that building to house the unit, and certainly the graphics that I've seen for that I understand will be coming back to through the appropriate planning process, show that as an extension to the harbour. So it's something much more kind of sympathetic rather than it sitting in isolation in that part of the harbour area.
To follow up, so is that the reason for the increase in cost, is that you're not just putting a substation on a plinth, you're actually integrating it with a building and having to extend that building to do that? Is that the increase in cost, is it?
Yes.
Yeah. The other thing I was asked at the Community Council, which was there are things sitting there that are not being used, which look rather scruffy, old structures that must have been there, and they're out of use. Are they being removed or going to be removed?
Not.
It's not fair.
Mr. MacLeod's humour aside.
I know.
Not specifically aware of what you're referring to. I know in the past we have stored, in terms of the harbour operations, there'll be an area, a compound that fishermen can use for storing kit that they may be using on and off the boats or working on the boats. In the past we've stored some of the pontoons from the adjacent marina before they've gone off for other use. So, I mean, if there was a particular materials there that need to be looked at, we can do that and we get some feedback. But it's a kind of dual function. It is a functional harbour, but it also is quite a kind of tourist attraction.
If you need anything more, I don't suppose the Common Good Fund Committee meets on the 7th of October. I rather think, I've just glanced at the planning application papers this month, and I'm not sure that might be in. I don't know. I wasn't paying much attention to them up here. Check them. But is it in? It is in. Yeah, I think I did see something. So it hasn't come to the Common Good Fund Committee for that site, so let's hope it's all right.
You may appeal to raise ward issues with officers, 5 minutes, but I appreciate it. It's an important issue. I appreciate it. Yeah. Absolutely. I'm going to bring Craig in at this point, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah. Chair, I was just wondering whether officers have looked at the fact of, because of the relocation of the possible substation, due to the fact that the Common Good Committee refused the site that it was originally intended for, and therefore has put additional costs of £60,000 onto this council. I mean, I wonder if officers have considered asking the Common Good Committee whether they'll contribute towards those extra costs, as I believe they do have funds sitting there.
I would imagine the answer that reasonably sure. I'm not aware that we have asked the Common Good for additional funding in this case.
On this point, yeah.
Yes, certainly on this point. I think Craig was maybe not aware of the background. There was an emergency item put on Stewart Area Committee over a year ago with regards to this power supply, and we were told how important it was for a decision to be made that it couldn't wait for a common good. And we're now over a year on and this project's still not complete. So if you actually saw the background to this, you would see that it hasn't been carried out just as smoothly as it might be. I'm not going to say that members were misled, but certainly we were told if a decision wasn't taken at the area committee that we'd lose the grant for this project. So it's certainly not a good example of a project being pushed through.
Stephen?
If I could just come back on that, Chair. Yeah, we've negotiated a number of dates with Scottish Government in terms of the funding, their contribution to the funding of this project. And as we would have advised at that time, we would have been working to a particular date they wanted us to meet. We've had that extended out, I would imagine, on a number of occasions now, and we've taken the funding into a further financial year. So it's kind of messed around with their budgeting process, so that would be the reason for the urgency at any one point, was really that we wanted to try and move the works forward to try and draw down the funding. And things like a number of other projects where we have external funding, we're always very keen just to try and grab that and make our own money go a bit further, and we will put forward, proposals that are not fully developed or not fully gone through the regulatory process, but we try to move the kind of funding approval forward at the same time as we move the kind of, in this case, the planning process forward and the consultation with the common good. So at times it has been urgent, and then that urgency has been driven by possibility that Scottish Government would withdraw funding, which they're well within their rights to do so.
Okay, I've got Ian Dick next, and then John Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Just on page 37, the Stranraer Gateway, the Bridge of Aird, it says it's delayed pending to legal agreements being signed by third parties. My question is, why was this presented to the area committee, which agreed it before the legal agreements were signed?
Chair, the two gateway projects in Stranraer came forward at the same time, the idea being that both would be delivered simultaneously. At that point, we were on the verge of having all the legal agreements signed. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with third parties, it's very difficult to predict. There had been delays which have kind of got caught up in the third-party organisation, and we haven't been able to influence the time frame on those being returned. I think we're now in the process of having those lease agreements signed. I think it's imminent. There isn't anything apparently which is blocking those. There just seems to have been an oversight from the estate dealing with it.
Thanks, Chair, for letting me back in. Could I suggest that projects are not put before area committees or service committees before all these things are in place in future?
We've had this debate before, actually, around the fact that sometimes you need permission from a committee before you start the legal negotiations. I don't know if it becomes a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, doesn't it? It's not an easy one, but I think we've had this before on a number of occasions around cycleways. When it comes to land negotiations, unless you give the officers the permission of the committee to enter into the discussions effectively, sometimes it can be difficult. So I'm sure we'll revisit this on numerous occasions, but it's a valid point. It's a valid point. It does lead to delays in projects, but I don't think there's any easy solution on it. I've got John Martin next.
Thanks, Chair. It's just on page 23, 324, the refurbishment of the traffic lights at the three road ends in Dumfries there leading up to the hospital. I'd just like assurances that we're going to have a completely robust traffic management plan in place when these works are taking place. I know they're being done during the October holidays, but if anybody remembers, I think, was it last year, they actually have done a wee bit of resurfaced at the three road ends there, and the traffic is a complete chaos down St Michael Street and right through Dumfries, more or less. So, as I say, it's really more assurances that we're going to have that, because along the top grade road, a minor road, unclassified road, the amount of traffic it goes along there when the work's taking place at these traffic lights is absolutely phenomenal. As I say, coming from that side of the town, for Johnson, etc., coming in for the Annan Road, they use that small road, the small country road, as a more or less a rat run to get to the hospital. And there's a lot of dog walkers, horses and that on them roads. And considering we had accidents last year on one of the unclassified roads with somebody out with a horse, it just doesn't bear thinking about what may happen if the amount of traffic as the chaos is there as it was when they were doing the resurfacing. There's just more or less assurances that there's a robust plan in place.
Thanks, Chair. Certainly, we're aware of the issues that are going to arise at this location. So that's why we've tried to pick a time when the traffic volume will be fairly low. We'll intend to put in place a good communication plan, inform people, know that the work is actually undertaken. And with regard to the traffic management, certainly that will need to be in place. And certainly my intention would be that would be essentially a manned facility where that could be varied to suit the circumstances. You've maybe seen that at other locations where rather than just rely on the signals automatically changing, that it's kind of manually controlled. And certainly that would be my intention, that would be in place during the peak periods, if not throughout the whole day. But I think inevitably there's going to be disruption arises through this, and what we're trying to do is mitigate that as best we can. And hopefully once it's completed, that the works will be of benefit. And hopefully that the MOVA process will actually reduce delays in the future.
Down there along Craig's Road, will that be getting monitored, the amount of traffic going along there? Because they certainly go along at quite a speed when that work's taking place.
That's certainly something we can bear in mind.
So I think delays will be inevitable. I think trying to tackle anything on that particular stretch of road without delays is going to be very difficult given the lack of alternative options, I suppose. But sure we'll get phone calls, John. I've got Ian Crothers next, and then Alistair.
Thanks, Chairman. It's in regards to page 50. It's the road safety programme, 50k accident investigation prevention. Just got a question, the 50k and against that, how fit for purpose is that 50k? So I suppose that just kind of out there, 12.5k per area. It's not a lot of money when it begs the question, are we actually taking safety seriously? But when you're doing that, it's the third bottom for the bottom, the first one in under Annandale and Eskdale, it references Stapleton Grange. In regards to it, it says proposals developed but not implemented, and in brackets land required, location not identified in the 2015 trawl removed from programme, it goes on to say. What does that exactly mean? And the reason that I'm highlighting that in particular, it's not been so much parochial, it is in a sense, but it was a week past Monday, it was brought up as an item of business for East Rix Community Council. It falls under their boundary, under their remit, and they're taking it forward. I think they've took it forward one of their list MSPs. They're raising concerns. So just as a matter of an update, where is that? And are we really taking safety concerns seriously when only allocating 50k a year?
John.
Chair, thanks very much. The AIP programme is driven by where we're identifying clusters of accidents, and also if there's common causations within any clusters of accidents that we can treat with low cost measures. I think probably the greatest number of accidents we find is maybe 6 or 7 at any one location, but more commonly we're probably only finding 3 maybe in a 3-year period at a location. So that makes it quite difficult to identify any common causations. Whether it's a big enough budget or not kind of depends on which sites we're identifying. At present, I would say the budget is adequate, and we've actually reduced that from previous year's allocation of £100,000. But if you bear in mind that that budget is specifically for AIP, which is through this identification of sites and then identification of measures to work at that location. With regard to the location at Stapleton Bar, just very briefly, that I did have a communication about that, just came in yesterday. What we've indicated is that in the past, there has been a number of accidents. We've tried to identify some works. Unfortunately, that required land acquisition that didn't get very far. In the latest trawl, the number of accidents is dropped off, so it doesn't qualify as a site. But I think my intended response was to deal with the sites we've identified this year, and And if there's still budget remaining, to go back to Stapleton Bar and try and resume our discussions at that site, given that it seems to come up on a fairly regular basis. If I go back probably 3 or 4 years, we'd actually undertaken other works at that location. So it seems to be a bit of an ongoing one. So we'll try and get back to that one if we can.
Okay, Ian. Just a quick remark, Chairman. Thanks for your indulgence. You just accept what you're saying. You think that the 50k is adequate. We'll see that as it pans out. In regards to the Stapleton Bar or Stapleton Grange, the crossroads that are there, it's something that you get there's a lot of unreported near misses there, and that's what's been identified through the Community Council. I think you've probably picked up on that through the communication that's come through, but certainly I think it's very important that we do keep it on the radar and we keep looking at that, make sure that it doesn't drop off our programme of works altogether. It is important because, like things that have been referred to earlier, I think there's a real chance of danger or even accidents at this junction.
I mean, obviously, I'd remind members that you set the budgets. If you wish to change the budget, then you can change the budget and obviously indicate where the money will come from. But members set the budgets, and officers obviously have to work to the budgets that we set. And that's the budget that was set at the time. So if members wish to change the budget, then they're obviously open to do that and obviously indicate where that money is going to come from. I've got Alistair next, then Patsy, then Finlay.
Thanks, Chair. It would seem with the greatest of respect, sir, that your exhortation fell on stony ground. But never mind. Later on in the agenda, item 11 to be precise, there is a strategic report which sets out in relation to harbour management and operation, Port Marine Safety Code updates for duty holders. And it sets out, as far as I'm concerned, Chair, a raft of rather sobering responsibilities which devolve in the Council and probably will ultimately devolve in the subcommittee of this committee, which I presume will be set up. And coming to the point, sir, I trust that as against that backdrop, Mr Speedy and his staff will appreciate the necessity of dealing with the projects in 3.12 of this report, which pertain to Stranraer Harbour and Isle of Whithorn and Galveston harbours, and get these done, Chair, as a matter of urgency. I take it, sir, you've got my drift. Thank you.
A very strategic question. I think, yeah, absolutely. I think that the point's well made, Alistair. The point's well made. Patsy?
I'm not going to be parochial, Chairman, you were pleased to know. Vehicle and Fleet Capital Programme on page 41. We seem to have an awful lot of rather old vehicles. And, you know, it's costing us £660,000 to replace them. And I just wonder if we're getting any trade-in value at all from some of these old ones. Having traded in an old Freelander myself and didn't get an awful lot of money, I can assume that perhaps you're not going to get much. And I just wonder if this is the best way of having our fleet being managed. Because presumably there's quite a lot of maintenance costs in here with these vehicles, you know, to keep them health and safety and all the rest of it and legal and whatnot. And I just wonder why we keep things for so long.
Unfortunately, I don't have a colleague from Fleet Management here, but effectively I can relay the matter back to them. And that their approach is one of sweating the asset, really is running the vehicles down or running them for as long as we can and maintaining them ourselves. And I could certainly put the question to them that are they convinced that that's the most appropriate way to run the asset. I think, as you've said yourself, the kind of retrade value, if they were to refresh the vehicle fleet any more frequently, there might not be the benefit in the resale value against actually just running the vehicle for another 4, 5, 6 years. I would imagine as well a lot of the vehicles, and it's not just what we run around in terms of the pool cars, but a lot of the kind of specialist vehicles are probably might not have particularly high mileage on them and can be run for longer. A lot of our the winter fleet that we actually own ourselves, although we do lease in a lot. In the past, when we owned our own winter fleet, I suppose it gets used a lot during the winter, and then there are some uses out of season. But again, I'll put the question to them just to come back on the matter about the best use in terms of the management, the asset management approach.
just you're always looking for savings and different ways of doing things, and just because that's the way it's always been done, has anybody actually looked at it and said that is the best way to do it? I have no problem if that is the best way of doing it. I have absolutely no problem at all. But if it's not, then perhaps it should be looked at, or it should be looked at and then decided it is.
Chair, through yourself, I'm quite sure that Fleet Management are operating a value for money process, but we'll check with our colleagues. Unfortunately, they're both on leave today. We'll check with our colleagues and I'll circulate a statement to all members.
Finlay and then Jim.
Thanks, Chair. Page 50, back to the accident investigation and prevention. There's an item there regarding King Street and St Andrew Street junction in Castle Douglas. This is not protocol. It's all to do with parking. We have a real issue now where Police Scotland don't appear to be policing traffic regulations as they did, and we know that they removed traffic wardens, whatever. I would suggest that the problems we have in King Street and Castle Douglas are purely down to not speed or anything. It's down to parking on double yellow lines and lines where there should be no waiting. Is there any evidence that the reluctance of Police Scotland to actually enforce traffic regulations are leading to an increase in accidents and near misses? Because it would certainly be the case in Castle Douglas with no traffic warden now.
Chair, thanks. It's not an issue I have any specific knowledge of. I think it'd be very hard to draw a conclusion. Like yourself, I despair at the Police Scotland attitude, but that's for them to determine. Within the LTS intervention that's actually included in the report with regard to Stranraer, Castle Douglas is one of the towns where we do indicate that we would review on-street parking, and I think there's probably opportunities there to create formalise some of the parking that essentially is actually already happening. The waiting restrictions there essentially date back to when the road was the A75 trunk road, and then perhaps unfortunately they weren't reviewed immediately after that the bypass was built. So there's an opportunity there to formalise some of the parking and say yes, you can park on this side of the road, but not to park at the junctions. There's a balance between road safety, congestion, traffic management, but also a bit of parking actually affects speed management as well. I think in the past the approach has maybe been almost like a kind of motorway approach. We must keep the road open for free flow of traffic, but the number of vehicles has increased so significantly. I think we now need to change that balance, and there's a demand for parking provision, concerns about speed of traffic, so there's a balance to be met there.
Yeah, I suppose my point was more general. It would be interesting to see where it's all very well this committee deciding on 30 mile an hour, 40 mile an hour speed limits, but actually if Police Scotland are then not enforcing these speed limits, there's very little point implementing them. And it'd be interesting to see over a period whether there's more incidents in 30 and 40 mile an hour limits because these are not being policed effectively.
I'll bear your comments in mind, but I think it'd probably be quite hard to draw a comparison between number of accidents and the speeds. I mean, the whole kind of purpose of speed limits is that they're essentially self-enforcing, and drivers, they arrive at a community, at a town, they recognise that they should drive at a lower speed, and generally that they do so. I mean, again, enforcement of traffic of speed is a matter for Police Scotland, and we have no great influence over that.
Point, it's a frustration of mine certainly in Dumfries that parking restrictions on street parking is not being properly enforced by Police Scotland at the moment, and it's an issue we just got to keep hammering away at the police to try to enforce it. It's clearly not a priority for them, but it does impact not only in terms of potentially safety issues, but actually also impacts on retailers because you have vehicles parked for longer than the time that they should be parked, and there's not that same sort of flow that you used to have basically. It impacts on businesses. I've got Jim next.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll try and keep it strategic. It's under the Intelligent Transport System, 3.27, page 24. I understand all that goes before it in saying that MOVA is going to be better than the VA system. However, we're being asked to recommend a system to be replaced by MOVA and agree a budget of approximately 10% alike for like. The unfortunate thing is neither of the two costs are actually in the report. An example, 10% of 10,000 is an awful lot less than 10% of 100,000. Is regarding the additional potential funding for cycle and walking infrastructure. I'm not exactly comfortable with the recommendation 3.32 that the prioritation, that's easy for me to say, of delivery would be determined by officers. Surely it should be members that decide on advice for officers. As regarding, and this one does come into my ward, however, it is a large section of this is Stranraer parking. I'm not just exactly sure why the contents of 3.47 are there regarding the off-street parking and the parking discs. That was brought up at area committee on another matter regarding enforcement. The number of tickets issued in Stranraer versus the number of tickets issued in Dumfries, and the wildly larger percentage of tickets issued in Stranraer than what they were in Dumfries. It was a community safety issue regarding the concentration on parking in Stranraer rather than other stuff, so I'm not quite sure why that one's in there. The other couple of ones is going back to the Stranraer gateways. It's nothing about the bridge here that's the one at Bulgate. When are we going to see the actual surface being done, which will then make that one complete? And my last one, and thanks for your indulgence, Chair, is the 20 mile an hour limits at schools. I noticed that there's none in Annandale and Eskdale, and there's none in Wigtownshire. Is there an explanation for that?
Got all the points there, but we can come back at any that are missed.
Thanks, Chair. Hope I got most of those as well. The first one regarding the MOVA, that at the time that the report was prepared on this option, the consultants that undertook that had obtained costs from suppliers, but hadn't supplied those. I think the important thing there is the benefit cost ratio of just over 8, which says that this additional expenditure pays for itself in less than 2 years, and it gives you that greater flexibility for the operation of that junction throughout the life of this equipment, which is normally about 15 years. In parallel to this report, we have actually had the tendered for this equipment, and the winning price came in at £30,000. £30,000, sorry, and that included the MOVA facility. So I think it's something new for our region. It's something that's becoming more common in other authorities, but certainly for a congested junction, as I'm sure we're aware that 3 road ends is, that it's a really positive step forward, and anything we can do to minimise the delays there and give flexibility is hopefully of benefit. 3.47 was about the parking ticket analysis. That really related to the length of stay. That was the part also of the same commentary about Stranraer and the Hanover Square car park. That the 2 hour, and that's in part of the Hanover Square car park is where the enforcement issues are issued. So there was a tie-up between those two things. The 20 mile per hour limits at schools, as members may recall, that the prioritisation of any further 20s is done on the size of the school roll, and it just so happens that there won't be schools in Annandale and Eskdale or in Wigtownshire in the kind of the top 5 or 6. We do have a list of all the schools by roll size, indicating whether or not they have a 20, and I'm happy to supply a copy of that if you wish a copy.
Else that was missed there, I suppose it was the cycle routes one. Stephen, are you going to deal with it?
So if I could come in, Chair, on the car park at the Stranraer Gateway, the Billiettes. I've checked with DG First on this in terms of the car parks in and around Stranraer that we maintain, and this has never been a car park that's been maintained by the council. That it's off the trunk road on the A77, What we can do is maybe check the ownership, but in the past, I'm not aware that it has been maintained by the road service at all.
Yeah, I think there was also the one on Appendix 9, the additional locations for cycling and walking infrastructure. Jim also raised the point about prioritisation by officers. I'm presuming that will come to committee anyway, but do you want to deal with that point as well?
The table that's there is hopefully a record of all the suggestions that have been made by community councils members or observations by officers. Some of them are very small beer, and it might just be a drop curb here or there. Other ones that sometimes come in from communities are really extensive pieces of footway. As we indicate in the report, very few of these we've actually been at and had a look at to see if they're achievable even, or to what extent, what the cost of them may be. But I think what I'd like to do, what I propose that we do is actually try and as we've indicated in terms of the likely benefit, in terms of the usage, the ease of implementation, how deliverable that is, if we try and maybe avoid ones that include land acquisition, for example, the cost, and how we fit those all together within the budget that's available. So one of the footway schemes, I think DG First had given us an estimated cost of something like £90,000. Well, that takes up a very large chunk of the budget, whereas I think maybe what we could do is work within some of the, and that was for a rural footway, was to work in our communities and get greater benefit to a greater number of pedestrians and to cyclists, get the best value for money essentially. And I think the final point of that is I'm very conscious that we tend to be a bit kind of focused on what you can do in Dumfries because we see that every day, and to try and get a spread across the region to spread the benefit and just try and benefit the greatest number of members of the public. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks for indulging me again, Chair. I'll go to Ballyet first. That was a rather strange answer. I was under the impression, and I think the rest of the area committee were under the impression that that was part of the Stranraer Gateway with a nice, although some local members will probably disagree with me, with a nice new facility sitting right in the shoreline. And are we now being told that the car park isn't going to be resurfaced? It makes a mockery actually doing the work to actually do it up, and is regarding the additional potential cycle and walking routes. Yeah, I understand that there may be reasons why officers wouldn't want to do one and do another, but I still think the decision on what one should be done, if the £90,000 one that was quoted was the most important one, surely that should be up to members to decide what the importance of the list is, no officers. I still think we can go and advise the officers, but it's up to us to decide how the council money is going to be spent, because ultimately we're the ones that answer for it.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that has to come before. And I think, to be fair, that's what happens with cycling proposals that come before this committee as part of this report. So I would fully expect those proposals to come before members, for members to agree that before work was commencing. So, Jason? Sorry, can't see.
Sorry, Chair, I'm hiding behind the lectern. Just to come back on the Ballyet Gateway. The resurfacing element of the car park was never part of the original design, principally because we didn't have the budget to resurface the car park. The intention was that we would try and coordinate that with any maintenance schedules that we had for resurfacing, and that's what threw out the ownership issue, that DG first informed us that it had never been on the maintenance rota, so to speak.
So it's owned by a third party. That lay-by is owned by a third party. It doesn't belong to the council. What I'm now trying to establish is who owns that lay-by. And if it's owned by the council, then surely it should be being resurfaced as part of the regeneration of the gateway at Ballyet.
I'll undertake to check the ownership. If we find that it's owned by the council, it might be a decision that we make. Certainly that this committee could decide that it wants to add it to the asset register for car parks. There are many areas of ground that the council don't maintain, and with the budgets that we have, it adds additional pressure. But if that's the decision of the committee. We can check the ownership and come back on that.
Okay, I have Ian Crothers next.
Chairman, my point is just when you get to recommendations, 2.6 and 2.9, please, when you get there.
Thank you, Chair. Just regarding 3.29, the streetlight and spend to save project, it's just a question to officers to see that they're happy that I know we're obviously in our third year of an 8-year programme, but are we still content that that programme is going to be running on time and on budget for completion in 2020?
Yes, certainly not aware of any issues, or certainly we have no concerns about delivering the complete programme. I think this far into the programme, it's probably due a report back to committee anyway in terms of what we feel the benefits have been in the rollout, and just continue to take it forward. And I think we'll work that into a future capital report.
Quickly on that same point, I spoke to the officer that was responsible for the introduction of the LED lights and the other ones, and in fact the modern manufacturer is bringing the price down. So actually, to answer your point, Craig, it will come in under budget, I believe, if we get these new units which are cheaper to buy now.
If I could just come back in again, Chair, we certainly, when we go to area committees and discuss the programme, there's always a bit of a discussion about could we accelerate the programme and bring the benefits forward. And the point raised by Councillor Ogilvie is one of the reasons why we want to stagger the programme, is that the cost, the unit cost, is coming down, and it's making it more affordable in terms of the coverage in the rollout. And that's why the programme has been staggered over a number of years. But I think, as I said, it's probably be good just to reflect on the programme and just talk about and just advise members on what we've achieved and some of the benefits that we've delivered on that, and how the plan just going forward in future years. This report has. We tend to report the in-year works. This report, for the first time, we're showing the appendix, the previous 2-year works as well, just to show what's happened in what areas.
I've got Ian Dick and then Graham Nichol.
Thanks, Chair. I'll make this brief. It was my understanding from the Area Committee and subsequent requests for information that Balliet was to be resurfaced.
Okay, we'll come back on that one. Okay, Graham.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. It was on the street lighting spend to save programme. Could we make sure that once street lights have been replaced or the new ones have been erected, that the old ones are switched off? Because there's nothing winds up the indigenous population quicker than seeing lights burning 24 hours a day. And there's some that I have reported more times than I've had hot dinners, which not very often nowadays. But anyway, could we make sure that we get on to whoever's responsible and get the old lights switched off and disconnected?
Point. I think of the opposite problem. The lights don't work in some of the streets, but that's a valid point. Okay, will we go to recommendation? I think Ian wants to come in the recommendation. Let's go through them. I think
just Chairman, if you could just very briefly on the street lighting, was where I want to come in again. Just very briefly, just because some of them come up against certainly in my local area, is that when we were retrofitting these LED lights, sometimes the coverage isn't quite as good as the sodium lights has been. I'm just wondering, is that factored into the budget as we go forward? Because I think we might have to address it at some point, putting in further posts of some kind, because the coverage is, in some places isn't there. Just as a matter of point as we go forward, maybe pick up on that out with the committee, but I think it should certainly point that it might become a budget pressure in the future.
Well, I certainly had it raised, but to be fair, the person that raised it complained about the fact it didn't light up their path in front of their house anymore. It only lit up the footpath that was owned by the council, and that's the whole point of these things in the first place. So, yeah, it might not have the same coverage, but they're not designed to light up people's gardens. They're designed to obviously light up the footpath.
Just to put it in context, for a standard column is 30 metres apart. Some of them are 50 and 60 metres apart, and some of them will have to be retrofitted. The head column, just no big enough in some of them. That's it.
Okay. Well, if there's any individual issues in any individual wards, then could I suggest members take that up with officers if they've got any problems with the street lights? Okay. Can we turn to the recommendations then? Are members happy to note 2.1? 2.2, 2.3, happy to approve 2.4, happy to approve 2.5. Okay, in relation to 2.6, I think we agreed that a future report will come before Annandale and Estill Area Committee with monitor information about the improvements that have already been carried out on the road, and obviously any information that comes from any accident reports. Obviously, the timing will depend on when we get that information. Ian, do you want to come in on that?
I just think it would be important that the area committee can also consider if there was a reduction in speed limits, whether it be 50, whether it be 40, what the cost implications would be to that, and would be any further benefit in safety terms. I know we've had numerous reports there, but it's the local aspirations, the local members, I think, need to be listened to here as well. So if we could ask for that information to be put to the committee as well, please, be more than happy to be your recommendation.
Okay, I'm sure the report will be comprehensive and take those points into account. 2.7, I'm happy to note. Okay, 2.8. Okay, 2.9, I would suggest that we add in, just for clarity at the very end, the phrase "with proposals brought before committee," just so members know that any prioritisation will come before. I think that will happen, but I think we just add that in just for any clarity for members. If you're happy with that. Okay. And finally, we're happy to agree 2.10. Yeah, okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay, members, can we turn now to item number 6, which is further supplementary guidance for the local development plan. There's obviously supplementary guidance for the Crichton Conservation Area before us today, for agreement to issue for public consultation, as well as obviously the feedback on the guidance on trees and development and alterations and extensions. Can I ask the Director if there's anything to add to the report?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members' questions? Alistair?
I really don't have any questions, Chair. I think it's a good piece of work, and as far as I'm concerned, depending of course on your own views and the views of colleagues, that I think we should be able to proceed pretty soon towards the recommendations.
Yeah, I would certainly echo those comments. I think the Crichton one, I have to say, is a fascinating read. I really do, and it'll be interesting to see the feedback on that. It's certainly a good piece of work. So if members are happy, we'll go straight to the recommendations. Yeah. Okay, happy to agree 2.1, 2.2. We've also looked at the responses at 2.3, so happy to agree the Council's response. 2.4, agree, and 2.5. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, same with this report. No. Can we turn to item number 7, members, which is the Stranraer Marina Outline Business Case. Obviously, this report or a similar report went before Wigtown Area Committee, and what members have been asked to do is to consider the recommendations that came back from Wigtown Area Committee with the preferred option of 3B2. Can I ask the Director if there's anything to add to the report before members?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members' questions? Graham?
First to the Chair, could I say I'm sorry that Councillor Maitland seems to have recycled herself off this committee. She was about the only ally I ever got, so I'm in for a long and lonely day. However,
In extremis.
nobody agreed that they were sorry, so I'll inform her later on. Now, neither I nor the public in the West are against developing the marina, but only over time and when future capital becomes available. The report before us today, the one contained within the papers, cost £37,000. We're now being asked to spend another £80,000 to work up the content. The choice before us today is a simple one. Does the content of the report instill sufficient confidence to plough ahead and spend another £80,000, or does it trigger alarm bells and caution? The decision of the Wigtown Area Committee, unsurprisingly, was not unanimous on July the 1st. There is no point of £6 million waiting to be spent in this project. And if we do go ahead, this will compete with the ongoing search, which you are actively involved in, Chair, to find capital for the development of the East Pier To do one project properly will be hard. To do two at the same time, I believe, will be impossible. The marina facility at the West Pier is good and is evolving, whilst there is nothing wrong with aspiration, and a measured approach in its development is the best way forward. For me, the alarm bells within the report are boat sales and brokerage down 60% in the past 5 years. The report confirms that it's unlikely that an independent marina developer would want anything to do with it or go anywhere near it. The business case states the preferred option will eventually generate profits around year 13. This assumes that all berths are fully occupied and does not take account of finance charges and depreciation. When these are applied, no profit is generated. The report also questions if which I do also, if the council possesses the skills to run a large marina. Current berthing charges at Stranraer Marina are £102 a metre. The business case uses the figure of £270 a metre, albeit raised incrementally over the next 5 years. In July, the marina was full with 13 on the waiting list and 1 intending to vacate. If the charges ever rose to £270, I am convinced there would be no waiting list. The marina is well used by locals and allows for visiting craft. Any increase in capacity should be backed by demand, not optimistic conjecture. And I may as well keep going because there will be plenty wanting to shoot me down. Turning to the recommendations, I move 2.1 note, 2.2 note, 2.3 not to commit 80,000 and further consultants' reports, and 2.4 to support future development and growth of the marina when evidenced by local demand.
Okay, thanks for that, Graham. Any other members? Ian?
I'll preface any remarks by saying that I have no intentions of trying to shoot Councillor Foster down at all. However, I would move the recommendations principally on the basis that we simply cannot advance the case for the marina and the development of the area around Stranraer waterfront without a full business case. We're at an interim stage. We've got an outline case. We need to spend this in order to determine whether it's feasible. I think the other defining factor is that it's one of the only sheltered harbour installation on the west coast of Scotland that is seriously underutilised. There are marine craft going up and down the west of Scotland all the way down to Wales, many of which miss out in Stranraer. And I think it's an ideal location for the development, and we need this full business case. And consequently, I would move the recommendations as they stand on that basis. Thanks.
Jim, next.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. This was discussed at great length at the area committee. I would go along with Councillor Dick, go with the recommendations. I hear what Councillor Foster's saying about £270 as a per metre. However, that's if you've got all the facilities that would be there if we built it. We've also got to remember that the East Pier development is strongly linked to the redevelopment and the increase in the marina. The company that has won the year's exclusive contract has said that quite openly. It is openly linked to the redevelopment of the marina. As I say, it was strongly argued at the area committee. I say we go with the recommendations.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Roberta?
Thank you. It's actually very refreshing for me to hear Graham, Councillor Foster, saying how wonderfully well that the marina is doing. I mean, that is so refreshing. That something's actually working in Stranraer. However, what I want to say is we're not just developing a marina for a few local people to enjoy all the resources. What we are regenerating the marina and rebuilding and expanding the marina is to regenerate the town. It's to help all the businesses and the local people inside. And it's the bigger picture you have to see. And I am fully supportive of everything in this report.
Okay, Finlay.
Thanks, Chair. I certainly back the recommendations. I think the council have got to be congratulated. We're actually investing in Stranraer. For far too long, we've talked Stranraer down. It's about time we actually got things shifted. Hopefully, this investment in Stranraer will kick the Scottish Government into actually putting back the money they promised Stranraer some years ago, and we can be looking at an investment of 6 million plus that they promised, because that's what Stranraer needs, and we should fully back this and put our faith in Stranraer becoming the town that it could be.
Patsy?
Can I just get it clear? This further investment that we're being asked to do here is to progress more of a feasibility study, is it? Yes. So can I just be reassured that should that study show that actually it's not viable, we will be told that, will we? Or are we going to be just sort of fudged? Because I have absolute sympathy with Councillor Foster here that, you know, there's a lot of money to be investing in something that might not work. And we need to know the options when it comes back to us for all these things, you know, because it's a lot of money. And I just wonder how that will be progressed and what we will get back from this feasibility study.
Well, that's the aim of the exercise, is to follow on from the outline process which we've been through, which has been quite detailed for an outline case. The consultants looked at 4 broad options for the redevelopment of the Marina, and then did a 4 further option analysis of the preferred option. So they've been quite thorough in their approach. The full business case will take this to the next level, where we'll start to look at the real technical case for expanding the Marina, looking at the detailed financial case, looking at how much it's going to cost to either provide a new breakwater or extend the existing one. So it really gets into a level of detail which the outline business case hasn't. So by the time we get to the end of the full business case, we should be fairly clear about how much it's going to cost for all of the heavy engineering and how much we're likely to generate over time from the revenue side. So it's not just about cost, it's about looking at revenue and income and the potential to grow that over a period of time.
Thanks for that, Jason. Do we have any other members? Okay then, Grail, yeah.
Just reiterate by what I started off saying, I believe there is sufficient information within this report that cost £37,000 to ring alarm bells. I don't think it's worth spending another 80, spending another year waiting on it, going down the road and then finding out A, we can't afford it, and B, we'll never manage to fill it.
Graham. Graham's obviously put forward a motion. Does he have anybody willing to second the motion? Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And we have obviously Ian's proposed we agree the recommendations, seconded by Jim. Are members happy to do that? Okay, thanks very much. Get another bash now, Graham. You get another bash now. Okay, members, can we turn to item number 8, which is the report back on the independent external report on Stranraer Waterfront and the Slipway and Boat Hoist project. Can I ask the Director if there's anything to add to the report before members?
There's nothing to add, Chair. I had hoped we would get this report back earlier in the summer, but it took the Institution of Civil Engineers some time to actually nominate an appropriate professional to look at this for the Council, and I received the report a week or so ago, so it's absolutely appropriate to bring it to this committee.
Okay, thanks for that. Can I open it up to members? Graham?
Round 2, Chair. No surprises within the report. I mean, if someone starts at the end, works backwards, asks the right people the right questions, it is inevitable they will receive the answers that they want. Even last week in Wigtown's Free Press, the editorial, when referring to the report, stated, The report, rather than putting the issue to bed, seems merely to add to frustrations. The people consulted in forming this report virtually guarantee the desired content. In his report to full council in his swan song, Alec Harswell said, "I was unable to establish what the process included, and as a result, there was no guarantee value for money had been achieved." One example of a half-truth within this report is where it states, "To date, a dinghy regatta has been held on the slip with success." This was actually a visit by Whigbay Sailing Club, and prior to the event, costs of £400 were incurred in utilising a digger and a road sweeper in order to make the slipway accessible. If the idea of the slipway was to increase marine activity within the loch, it can only be described as an abject failure. It is entirely tidal dependent and can only be used 2 hours either side of high tide. This leaves 16 hours per day when it serves no purpose. Also, it is continually silting up and requires clearing. It is impossible to organise any activity involving the slipway without first checking tides and arranging the clearance of silt. Value for money has not been achieved. Public acceptance has been irreparably damaged. Turning to the vote hoist, I have previously stated fears that this may become Stranraer's version of the Angel of the North, quietly rusting away in inactivity. We have had sight of the proposed charges, but we have yet to see a credible business case to justify its installation. At a previous meeting, when questioned, an officer stated he expected it to lift out 30 vessels in the first year. If that level of confidence exists, put it in a projected cash flow and present it to this committee. I also have concerns over its location. I believe that this will lead to future conflicts with commercial fishermen who were never properly consulted in the first instance. A future report should come before this committee containing a detailed business report and the results of full consultation with the commercial users prior to any installation. I'll give you my motion again now, Chair, which no doubt I'll have to record my dissent. 2.1. Note the content and conclusions of the independent external report and ensure that the Director of EEI puts in place operational changes to project management processes to cover the issues raised. I feel the existing 2.1 is not strong enough. 2.2. Prior to the completion of any boat hoist works, a detailed business case and results of full consultation with commercial users is brought before this committee.
Okay. Do you have any other members? No. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I've heard Councillor Foster say about the Angel of the North rusting away in the past. I also made the same comment. If the hoist becomes as successful, even half as successful, of attracting people as the Angel of the North Day, I think Stranraer will be a perfectly happy place.
Perhaps we could put it as a gateway.
Excuse me, Councillor Foster. I no one to do the chair's job from, but you've had your chance. It's now my chance. The outline business case, you've just rejected a full business case for the extension of the Marina. So now you're wanting a full business case done for the hoist. I think that's rather strange. I would be interested in actually reading your new point 1, but as far as I'm concerned, 2.2, I'm willing to go with 2.2, although I would be interested to read your wording on 2.1.
Okay. Do you have any other members? Okay, Graham, do you want to clarify the point on 2.1?
Firstly, to clarify Jim's point, we have had a business case, albeit it's not fully worked up for the previous item. To me, there's sufficient alarm bells in it to discard spending another 80,000. We never have had sight of a business case for the boat hoist. All we've had are projected costs that it would hope to levy. So we've had no business case, so I'm not rejecting a business case in that. But getting back to 2.1, I hope the committee at least come part of the way with me and feel that we have to beef up 2.1 to make sure that we never have a reoccurrence of this. Because it's happened not just in Stranraer, it's happened in other places in Dumfries. And if this committee is going to be meaningful and do its job, we have to beef it up a bit to make sure it never happens again. To reiterate 2.1, and I'll say it slowly just in case people are inclined to agree with me, note the content and conclusions of the independent external report and ensure that the Director of EEI puts in place operational changes to project management processes to cover the issues raised.
Jim, do you want to come back on that?
I'd be perfectly happy to support the rewording of 2.1, but 2.2, I would ask that it goes as recommended.
I mean, I don't have a problem with 2.1 because it's actually contained within the report anyway at 3.7. Therefore, I don't have a problem at all with that amended wording in 2.1. Ian?
No, I'm quite supportive of Councillor Foster's 2.1. Obviously, I'm supporting 2.2 as read.
I mean, what I would also say, though, this report, this independent report, and I'd stress independent report, was exactly what full council asked for. And the reason why individuals were interviewed was because that's what the council asked to happen. It was a process on decisions taken by officers, and that process has been fully followed as part of that independent review. And importantly, what that review has concluded is that the decisions that were taken by officers were entirely appropriate and that value for money was achieved with the amended project before us. And I think we should stress that is what this report actually tells us. Now, there are issues there around, I think, councillors' decision-making processes and communications with councillors that I think need to be addressed as well. I mean, we've talked about the operational issues and that's fair enough, but I think in the past, members have obviously raised issues around other projects where maybe changes have been made in those particular projects and they haven't come before members for agreement. The reality is officers have implemented the decisions of committee, but I think what we need to look at is how we actually beef up the fact that if there are a change to a particular project, then obviously, in this case, it did come before committee, but in other cases, it hasn't always come before committee because the remit that us members, I have to stress, have agreed has given a very wide berth, if you like, to officers to implement a decision and make changes. And I think it's important that when there are big changes to capital projects, that has to come before committee before those changes are actually made. And I think as much to protect officers as anything else, because actually we're the ones that make the decisions and we should take the flak for those particular decisions. You know, but in the past, changes have been made to projects and we've almost found out about those changes second hand. And I think that's one of the lessons from this project. But I would stress actually that this report is independent and we should not question at any time the integrity of that independent report. And it has basically endorsed the decisions that were made, but there are lessons around communications. And I think from members' point of view, there are lessons there about decisions that we make as well. And I think that needs to be looked at. And only put an additional recommendation in there to consider that as part of the process going forward, but how we actually make sure that committee members make decisions if there are any changes made to capital projects in the future. I think that's important.
Could I just come back? Yeah, I take on board what you're saying, but nobody will ever convince me, I was against the decisions that were taken anyway, as the records will show if you care to look back. But nothing, or this report or anything else, will ever convince me and the vast majority of the people in Stranraer that the Slipway is good value. Hide it under the guise of value engineering, etc., etc. But a thing that is only used 8 hours out of 24, to me, is of no use at all. Are we adopting my 2.1, just for clarification?
Yeah, let's turn to the recommendation unless we've got any other members. Okay, 2.1, are we happy to adopt the amended wording? Yeah, okay. And we've obviously got a difference here. Graham has a motion that covers 2.2. Do you want to repeat what that motion is, Graham?
Put the goggles back on, sure. Prior to the completion of any boat hoist works, a detailed business case and results of full consultation with commercial users is brought before this committee. So it's not actually putting a halt to it. I want to see that the thing stacks up and the fishermen have been consulted. I don't think that's unreasonable.
Okay, do you have a seconder for that? Okay.
As per previous, record my dissent, please, Chair.
Okay. Now, Jim, you moved obviously 2.2, so that the rest of the committee are happy to accept 2.2 as it's read. Okay, and I think finally we need to add in just, and having made the suggestion, I don't actually have a formal words for the recommendation, but I think around the issues that are raised about communication, and member decisions that it's important that when capital projects are, any amendments to capital projects come before committee for agreement. I think that we can.
I think it was contained in the minute of the full council.
Members happy with that, yeah.
So clarification there, at full council we agreed that they would review the whole process of delivering capital projects, and it was going to go to the, was it Policy and Resources Committee, if my memory serves me correctly? Has there been any progress on that?
There certainly hasn't been any progress, but just for members' benefit, in my own memory, the actual decision agreed at full council was to review standing orders to include elected members in the delivery of capital projects. So I think that covers the fact that that we're looking at standing. In fact, I think I raised that at the ad hoc subcommittee last week on schemes of delegation. That piece of work is being undertaken as we speak. So we'll get a report back on that. Okay, members, thanks. Okay, can we turn now to item number 9? Okay, members, this is development of the term management and maintenance contracts for the Scottish Trunk Road network. It's a consultation from the Scottish Government, and a copy of the draft response proposed is contained in the appendix, and we're obviously asking members to agree the Council's response. Can I ask, Director, if there's anything to add to the report before members?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members? Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. As far as I'm concerned, sir, the proposed response is a good response. It's robust. I would draw your attention, in particular, Chair, to the box at the top of page 318, which is the answer to question 6, and also to the box at the bottom of 319, which is the response to question 10. And you know, in relation to the latter in particular, current arrangements do not work well between the parties, and limited adjustment to arrangements in the trunk road contracts is not the solution. Scotland needs a locally accountable road service model which draws on the best practice which exists and protects this valuable asset for the future. And specifically, Chair, there's no scope for improvement in terms of liaison with regard to issues being raised by the public or by the Council on their behalf within Dumfries and Galloway, as unfortunately there appears to be little accountability to local communities as service users within the current arrangements. Chair, you were more than forbearing under item number 5 earlier on in the agenda today, and I'm not going to sort of try to rerun the same process, but what I will say in relation to that is that I can give you a classic instance of that. It's coming to the time of year where, quite frankly, those of us, use the 75, and particularly in the Newton-Stewart stretch, will not come off the 75 at the junction of the 712 because you've got a wee lane there which I tend to call the shunt lane, and with the dark nights coming and the absence of lighting, suitable lighting at that junction, there's been a number of near misses, and regrettably 2 or 3 years ago there was also a fatality involving a young man, although I would have to say that I'm not sure whether the absence of lighting would contribute in any way, shape or form to that, Chair. But the point I would make is that that's a precise illustration of the comments which are contained in these responses, and I find them commendable, and I would hope that we would support them. That's the first point. The second point I would make, again, with your leave, Chair, is that paragraph 3.5 would talk about the Council acting as a subcontractor to the South West Trunk Roads Operating Company. Now, I appreciate, sir, that these operation companies were put in place several years ago, and I rather suspect that it was more for ideological rather than perhaps pragmatic reasons. And I wonder, Chair, if there's any possibility of us getting back to the old arrangement, and I would be guided, Chair, through yourself by Mr. Speedy in this connection, where in years past, this Council basically operated as a trunk roads agent itself. And the income that we got from that, Chair, did help to defray, as it were, the costs of running a road service in the wider context of Dumfries and Galloway. And if that is deemed to be feasible, sir, I would suggest that in addition to adopting these comments, that we should ask for that possibility to be explored to the maximum possible extent. Grateful for your indulgence, Chair.
Alistair, echo entirely your sentiments there. Alistair, do you want to deal with the point around the subcontract?
Yeah, it's some time now since the Scottish Government put the management of the trunk road network out to tender. for private companies to tender for and to carry out the management, and it's going through a number of generations. In fact, I think this is generation 5. It's moving 4 to 5, so this is the 5th generation, and normally these contracts have been for about 4 or 5 years, so it's quite a length of time. And Councillor Geddes is absolutely correct. Back when we were the regional council, we were certainly the trunk road agents for the Secretary of State at that time. We operated the A74 dual carriageway, and when the motorway was built from the boundary up to Johnson Bridge, we actually were responsible for the maintenance of the motorway until the motorway was extended under a private finance contract, design, build, finance and operate, and the operate part meant that we lost the maintenance of the motorway to that private operator who now looks after the full length of the motorway. Yes, we had a fully integrated system, and there were lots of positives and lots of benefits of that. I think the prime benefit was that members did have a big input into roads, trunk roads particularly, went through their communities. And I'm thinking about the A75, thinking about the A7, I'm thinking about the A76. And to some extent that's been diluted by the private sector on behalf of the Scottish Government looking after these roads. But I think as a council we have to work hard to get them to listen, to get them to come to the table and talk about the issues that we have. Whether it's likely that that will come back the way, I'm not sure. There is potential talk about it actually going further away from us, and that you almost get one road authority for the whole of Scotland. But that at this time is just an assumption. But I'm sure Stephen, who is very close to this and is working on this as well through his position in Scots, might add some landscape to what I've said.
I think in terms of the report and the consultation response that I'm proposing, it probably goes a bit further beyond the points that Councillor Geddes has raised about local accountability and the input of local interests, and the kind of rigour that comes from scrutiny from members is identified as missing in the trunk road network. Moving beyond the kind of relationship that we had under the first generation contracts where we were an agent, the consultation is really looking to support the work that's going on just now about wider options, more radical options. And the report, in terms of the consultation response, refers to the possibility that away from the central part of the network in the country, that we don't have this division between trunk and local roads. And there's a lot of local authorities would be quite keen to take that control of elements of the trunk road network and take the funding and manage that as a complete package. There's work going on just now between Scots and COSLA and SOLAS working together to report back to COSLA at the end of November on the range of options, as well as kind of feeding back into this Transportation Scotland consultation. The bigger picture on roads collaboration has been looked at in terms of is there an opportunity to have efficiencies in setting up more regional areas and just what size those regions would be. Is there better efficiency in collaboration working across a number of councils to deliver the roads authority function up to that extreme example of a one roads authority approach? Certainly my idea in this consultation response though was to flag up that the work that COSLA are doing, which there has to be a kind of bottom-up approach, and it has to be from a local accountability and a local interest and a local usage, as well as a kind of strategic usage of the trunk road network. And I would hope that the consultation response kind of embraces that possibility that we would see a desire by this authority and other rural authorities particularly for more control over the network as a whole and not have this kind of arbitrary distinction between trunk and local.
Stephen, Alistair?
I'm grateful, sir, for the detailed and comprehensive response, but one police authority, one fire authority, one roads authority, Chair, need I say any more? If we're looking for radical, alternatives, maybe, as I said, the reversion to the previous arrangement, albeit 5 generations ago, or whatever you want to say, might be worthwhile also being pursued as a radical alternative. I feel it is much to commend it, Chair.
Agree 100% with your comments, Alistair. Okay, Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. I agree with Alice's comments and your comments as well when it comes to that. But what really gave me the frighteners there is what Alice has just alluded to, what Stephen said in regards to one authority, one roads authority. I think that certainly would be a move in the wrong direction. But in order to, rather rehearse what everybody else has already said, and I think in order to get some teeth and get some real local decision in regards to Dumfries and Galloway Council, when it comes to recommendations, we really need a further report. Because you're looking at some councils are for it, some are against it. There could well be opportunities for Dumfries and Galloway Council when it comes to collaborative working or even taking on the trunk roads in real terms. There's opportunities there. We didn't see that within this report by any means. We know it's indicated that DG First creates a surplus, and that does add some benefit, but we could actually be maximising a much greater benefit if we put this together in the right package and develop it in the right way. It goes back to having more control, I think, at a local level. If that's the aspirations of Scottish Government, then I think we should make them very clear what Dumfries and Galloway Council thinks in regards to that. And the proper way to do that would be have a full report outlining the best way forward for Dumfries and Galloway Council. And I certainly am aligned with Alistair and yourself, Chairman, when it comes to retaining what we've got at a minimum. And actually, if there's opportunities there to gain greater control or even influence when it comes to the trunk road networks, then we should jump on that from a great height if we've got that chance. So that's mine. I would only ask that we add as part of the recommendations under point 2, paragraph 2, that we get a further report detailing the level of opportunities how that Dumfries and Galloway Council could gain from this, whether it's through collaborative working or just there's a whole raft of opportunities that just touched upon within the report, Chairman.
I think it's difficult. I mean, there's two things there. There's actually a meeting of the COSLA subcommittee on Friday that I'm attending, and this item is on the agenda. And certainly given the feeling of the meeting today, and I think the excellent response that's contained in the papers, I'll be reiterating the importance of the COSLA approach, which is that it needs to be a bottom-up approach and not something imposed centrally. But the reality is, until we know what the outcome of this consultation is, then we don't know what we're dealing with. You know, I think our position is set out very clearly in the response. I think COSLA's position is very clear, but the decision will be taken by the Scottish Government. They may impose a more centralised approach, and therefore it doesn't really matter what we think at that point. That'll be something that'll be imposed. So we really need to find out what the outcome of the consultation is, and then look at what the implications are for Dumfries and Galloway. I think our position is set out, I think, very clearly in the response, and I think COSLA's position has been quite clear, and that will be debated again on Fridays. But until we know what the Scottish Government's approach is, then there's very little we can do. I think if you look at the report, in terms of collaboration, it does indicate there's currently little appetite from local authorities adjacent to Dumfries and Galloway for a sort of formal collaboration approach when it comes to the roads in Dumfries and Galloway. But actually, if the speculation is correct, then that may be imposed on us by the Scottish Government. Ian?
Thank you, man. I understand where you're coming from, Chairman, but I think if there's an opportunity here for us to put more teeth to it, NHS, unitary, Dumfries and Galloway, whether it's a police force, we've still got a degree of police and fire, that unitary influence over it. I think we should raise our concerns. I mean, we've certainly answered questions in response to this consultation, but I think we need to raise the concerns at the highest level. And I mean, I think, but also we'll give ourselves the opportunity to realise any opportunities that we could benefit from, keeping it local. I know it's the bottom-up approach, but it's more than anything. The Scottish Government constantly promote localism, but for some reason it doesn't seem to come out through their policies. I think we should jump on this as early as we possibly can, that this should remain local, and if there's benefit be had through the delivery of services in regards to roads in this area by dealing at a local level, then we should be pointing that out to them. That's touching on it in here, but it's no the detail that we could actually have.
Certainly, if you look at paragraph 3.9, it does indicate the next discussions that will take place with the Ayrshire Roads Alliance and Cumbria County Council to look at potential options. But I do come back to my point that the decision will be made by the Scottish Government, and I agree with you, we do need to lobby hard, and that's certainly the point I'll be making, that COSLA need to continue to lobby hard on this issue at the meeting on Friday. And I think the response does put a pretty robust approach. I'm sure we'll get updates in our future reports on the outcome of the discussions at 3.9, and that may be the way forward. Okay. Any other members? Sorry, Ian Dick, sorry, I missed you there, Ian. And then
thanks, Chair. And first of all, I would say that the responses are commendable within this report. Can I just ask exactly, I mean, I'm well aware we've had well, we've certainly had 6 major upgrades on the A75, not least of all Dunraget and Kinmount and Hardgrove. There are still constant issues about surfacing, which I understand is a revenue issue, and capital expenditure. What does this council do in practical terms to lobby Scottish Government for A75, well, our trunk roads in general, but specifically the A75 being a Euro route? I'm not leaving aside the 76 and particularly the 77 with its problems, but what exactly does this council do in terms of lobbying? Because certainly if there's not a formal arrangement in the meantime, then I certainly think that this council needs to be shouting its corner ahead of Highland and the northern regions.
At a time the debate is centred on the dualling of the road from Perth to Inverness, I think it's good timing to make that particularly valid point. Stephen, do you want to come in?
In terms of lobbying or influencing spend, colleagues in DG First in a network management role have regular meetings with the trunk road maintenance agents, both for the southwest and for the southeast contract that cover the A7. Again, there's a certain amount of influence that can be had there, but I wouldn't think that it won't overturn Transport Scotland's prioritisation decisions in terms of what elements of the network require further investment. If we do have particular problems, we tend to escalate those straight to the kind of Transport Scotland and bypass the maintenance agent, and that is met with some success in the past and sometimes not particularly successful.
I'm thinking more in terms of a much higher level rather than DG First discussions with Transport Scotland. I'm talking about lobbying at government level, and to me that's a fairly senior issue because it concerns additional funding for Transport Scotland's work down in this region.
Valid point. We obviously agreed on a new lobbying strategy as a council recently, and there was an implementation plan within that decision. I think that's one that absolutely needs to sit absolutely at the centre of that new strategy, and I'll certainly take that up. Okay, is it on this particular point? Because I've got another couple of speakers. Ronnie?
Part of that was that if there's a lobbying need, it would be incorporated into the report. You know, like you've got a risk assessment. Now, one of the things that we put forward at the time was it should be one of the tick boxes, lobbying required, yes, no. I don't see it appearing in the papers, and that was one of the things, because I remember just debating it on the day.
Unfortunately, I was at that particular meeting, but I think you're absolutely right, and I think there was also an assumption that simple practice where we're responding to a Scottish Government consultation, a copy of that response is sent to all the South of Scotland MSPs, for example, so they're aware of Dumfries and Galloway Council's position on a Scottish Government matter. So I think that was one of the tactics as well within the lobbying strategy. We will get that checked up to make sure that what was agreed in the new lobbying strategy is obviously implemented as part of any decisions we make today. And I think flagging up the importance of the A75 as part of lobbying is obviously absolutely crucial. I've got Alistair, then Ian Crothers, then Finlay.
Thanks very much indeed, Chair. Can I suggest that if we're all deem that the proposed response commendable, that we adopt it and send it on our behalf? I have taken cognizance of the comments that you've made in relation to COSLA's involvement. I'm prepared, as it were, to go along with these, Chair, but subject to the proviso, if I may, that we don't lose sight of the fact that maybe one of the options at the appropriate time, which should be fed into the mix, should be reverting to what took place 5 generations ago. And I'll be totally honest about this. You look and you see just exactly, for instance, what is taking place in in the A9, and as far as I'm concerned, turn green with envy on occasions. And I think that one of the issues that we should be looking to adopt is get some form of statistical information, in relation to sort of traffic flows in the 75, and compare these in relation to, what's taking place in the A9, and see, in fact, if we can batter down the doors and making a case to ensure, in fact, that we're getting equitable treatment in relation to that particular route. It's been said in the past that, well, the link up, the A9 will connect the north of Scotland to the south of Scotland. It'll not connect it to the south west of Scotland. And as I say, I think, these are issues that we've got to come out fighting and fight our corner, Chair. And if that ruffles feathers in the process, well, so be it, as far as I'm concerned. We're here to look after the interests of Dumfries and Galloway.
Absolutely agree with 100%. Alistair, I'll certainly, on Friday at that meeting, I'll certainly raise the issue around effectively the road maintenance around trunk roads. I think that with members' agreement, then if that's the position of the committee, certainly to raise that as an option going forward. But I think you're absolutely clear in terms of the lobbying priority of that particular route. I've got Ian and then Finlay.
Thanks, yeah. I will be really brief for the touching on the right, because back to the lobbying part that everybody, I think Ronnie's touched on, Ian Gallus has touched on, you obviously yourself. Every confidence in yourself when it comes to Cosler this Friday, but I do think we've got an opportunity here, and if we snibber nose at it, if we didn't get in at this cross-party, we'll miss an opportunity here. I've been involved in quite a few lobbying activities over the past, but the most successful one, on reflection, was when it was Jeff Lever, Brian Collins. I felt anyways, and myself, went up to the Scottish Government, sat down with the ministers, and sat and argued a case, and argued a case, and for 2 years in succession, we were the second highest, out with Glasgow Housing Association was the only one that was above us at the time, for 2 years in succession for the delivery of social housing across Scotland. There's an opportunity staring us right in the face. If the whole council gets behind it, we start lobbying hard now. If we don't, we'll miss the opportunity. We need to jump on this with both feet. I think the starting point is you on Friday, but thereafter we need to get behind this cross-party.
Would agree with you. Okay, Finlay.
Thanks, Chair. It'd certainly be very useful to get some feedback on the type of work that the council are doing with regards to lobbying for the A75. We've just sat here and approved another investment of £80,000 into Stranraer and looking to invest a whole lot more, where the A75 is absolutely critical to that, and we should see the A75 as the route to the gateway into Scotland. The A75 does have a higher density of heavy good lorries than any other road in Scotland, but there appears to be very little that the council can do to put pressure on the Scottish Government for upgrades, and we've recently seen the bypasses raised again for Springholm and Crockett Ford, and no doubt it will be in some party's manifesto going forward, as it has been for the last don't know how many years. One of my questions was how much information and how much work is done between Transport Scotland and the council. I was led to believe that there was going to be a large investment in road improvements in the Gatehouse bypass, and that was actually cancelled. They were supposed to take place before Christmas, but they've been cancelled with no future date that these are going to be done. What sort of information did the council get with regards to road improvements like that? Because certainly that's a scheme that's long overdue, and we're back to it being a road safety issue, and just wonder if the council are aware of that funding being withdrawn.
No, I don't think we have any intelligence on the reason it's been withdrawn. We wouldn't have any position to change the agreement. It's obviously a priority maintenance budget or programme that Transport Scotland have with their various agents, but we can look into that and find out for you. On the A75, the North Channel Partnership used to be an excellent lobbying model, but there hasn't been a meeting of that for some time because the Irish interests have not been so enthusiastic. But I know that Harry Thompson, through his role as lead officer for Swestrans, is at the moment attempting to get that body back together again. So we'll keep members advised about that.
Okay, Jim, A76.
Absolutely, Chair, absolutely. Since we mentioned the 75 minutes, well, I mentioned the 76 as well. You know, in the last year, the Wains and Sankers have spent more on sweeties than the Scottish Government spent on the 76. We've a set of traffic lights that are now in place for 18 months, and I can't get an answer from anybody. Transfer Scotland, a Scottish Government. There's nobody answering the question, why are they still there and why is nothing done about it? And as a roads authority, or as an authority, we should actually be pressing to get something done to make sure our region's recognised and to make sure that the travelling public are not disadvantaged and taken advantage of by faceless individuals. And that's definitely not the council. But there's something wrong when major trunk roads that bring trade and business and working people to this town can't get doing the A76 route being stuck in traffic lights for an 18-month period, and there's no been a person working there for the last 12 months, and I travel it 3 and 4 times every week. It's a disgrace. So it's not only the A75 we need to pay attention to, it's the whole network, and it's important to this region that it's invested in and that it's maintained to some degree. And I would hope that some officer from today will contact the Scottish Government and find out what on earth's going on and why we are being ignored. And that's not just that particular one incident I'm talking about today, but as a region, we're not getting the respect we deserve, and we're certainly not getting the investment we deserve, and that's A75, A77 and A76.
Thanks for that. Okay, do we have any other members? Okay, let's turn to the recommendations. There are a number of points raised by members there. First of all, I think everybody is in agreement that it's a very robust and a good response in the appendix, so are members happy to agree the response? Okay. There's obviously a number of other issues raised by members as well, in particular around lobbying in support of improvements to the trunk road network within Dumfries and Galloway. So I'm going to dodge the issue here by handing over to governance to maybe summarise some of the points raised by members to see if we want to add them into the recommendations.
Well, just to put it in a nutshell, really, just want to ensure maximising lobbying opportunities to make sure that, you know, the needs of Dumfries and Galloway are met in terms of trunk road maintenance and equitable treatment against other regions. And Councillor Crother's point that we get a further report on the outcome of the consultation and what opportunities that would present for D&G. So I'll obviously make the wording slightly more robust in the minute, but that kind of captures what the feeling of the committee is, I hope.
Okay, I've got Ian Dick and then Ian Crothers and then Brian.
Just it's not only maintenance but capital expenditure. I think that's important.
Yep. Just with the future report, we must again on localism as well. Absolutely clear on localism. Must be from the bottom up, even though we've talked about that.
Okay, yeah, Brian.
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to ask if officers would be in a position to give members a table of the traffic movements on each of our trunk roads and some indication of comparator authorities who have had greater success in achieving investment. This goes back to Councillor Geddes' earlier point regarding our recognition of where we stand in the tables insofar as our success or otherwise in lobbying, and how we can make the strongest possible case to lobby for that level of investment to be attracted to Dumfries and Galloway.
We can certainly examine that, Councillor Collins, and see if that's possible. We won't necessarily hold that data, but we'll ask and find out what we can get. Yeah.
Thanks, Chair. I am aware of the kind of information that Transport Scotland holds on the trunk roads and the traffic flows, and I know in the past there's been peaks and troughs in their decisions and determinations around the 75, saying that their traffic goes on to and comes off of the 75, and there's low spots in between and so on. But I would suggest that the same could be said of the A9 and many other roads up and down the country. I think, however, it would be useful to see where the successes that have been achieved by other areas have been rooted in terms of the argument, and where we can construct the argument in our favour in recognition of the traffic flows that we are dealing with on a daily basis, and the essential nature of our roads insofar as the economy of the South West is concerned.
Okay, Finlay.
Yeah, I agree we need to look at the lobbying a bit more, but I wonder whether we need some more specifics or what the process would be. I think everybody would agree that the call for a bypass for Springholm and Crockett Ford, there's been a call for that those road improvements for the last 40 years, and I don't think there's anybody any doubt that as the only two 30-mile-an-hour limits between Belfast and Barcelona on what's supposed to be a Euro route should be a priority. You we've discussed how we lobby. I would like to call for the council, the first project, or the first lobbying project, is to call and push for a bypass for those two communities, because it's something that's been banded around for 40 years, and we're now at a point where the level of heavy goods vehicles travelling through these communities is just unacceptable. And I would like something more concrete being in terms of lobbying for the bypass for those two communities.
I would suggest that probably will come on the back of the future report that we'll get on the opportunities. I'm sure Jim will talk about improvements needed to the A76. Others will have other parts of the A75 as well. So I think that we'll have to bring that information back. I think on the back of Brian's point about numbers, and actually have rather than making it up as we go along, actually have a coherent approach to what we think across the trunk roads. And I think that certainly would be a project that would be, I suppose, part of that, but it needs to be looked at in the round of trunk roads, I think. Okay, Alistair?
Just to say, I support your comments on that particular issue entirely, sir. And I think we do make a coherent case. We've got to make a coherent case.
I think the point's well made, Finlay. Okay, members, we happy with that as a way forward? I'm not going to repeat all the decisions, but I think we're quite clear on that approach. Thank you very much, and thanks for the robust response in the appendix. Okay, members, can we turn now to item number 10?
Can I suggest, seeing these are not too meaty subjects, could we break for lunch first and then?
I'm conscious that we are running out of time there, so this will go on beyond the close of 1 o'clock, so I think we're going to be here after lunch. So are members happy to break this point or continue to break? Okay. Okay, how long do we normally give people? 30 minutes? Which is the Whitesands project and options that are before members today for further public engagement. In order to outline what those options are and the work that's taken place since the public consultation exercise, James is going to give us a presentation on those options. So over to yourself, James.
Thank you, Chair. Let's see if this works by sitting here. Yep, seems to. So just a brief introduction, some feedback from the January 2015 engagement sessions, the development of the alternatives and comparison of to the alternatives. This is a lot of information that's on the boards that the members will have had or may have had some opportunity to see previously. This takes the text from the top of the board, and what we're trying to say here is that we believe that the area of the Whitesands is an underutilised area and an outstanding asset of great potential, but the flooding continues to have an impact upon regeneration, which affects not just the Whitesands but the town centre itself. And there's an opportunity here to revitalise the Whitesands. And the picture there is the kind of concept of where we were looking before about the green fingers of extending Dock Park north and the sort of green sands and out of the town coming south. And the picture there on the other side is actually Glasgow city centre, so not somewhere warm in foreign climes at all. So back in January 2015, we undertook an engagement session, and we put forward there the detail that's shown on the right hand side of the screen, which is the large embankment. And the main feedback from that was there was a lot of questions asked, but car parking and visual impacts were probably the biggest issues that were brought up. The feedback on that was reported to Nithsdale Area Committee on the 2nd of September. And at that committee, in addition to the recommendations to members, there was a request that this committee, the EEI committee, the views of the public would be taken into account and a compromise solution sought, and this is part of that action. And the next slides I'll go through show the sort of development of the project. So we took the embankment that was built on the sands, the model that was built on the sands, and looked at a redesign to reduce the height of it by providing the top metre of protection through the use of a glass wall. But you can appreciate the embankment still reasonably high at 2 metres. Still has an impact on views and didn't address any more of the parking concerns. We took this a stage further refinement to this in looking at ideas and dropped the embankment again to sort of around about the 1.4 metres high, with a glass wall again, and to make up the remainder of the defences to achieve a permanent one in 75 would be with a demountable. It addressed a lot of the visual impacts, but again, didn't address the parking concerns or assist in the parking concerns. We would also looked at, on a sort of different tangent, we looked at the options of a self-rising barrier designed when water levels rise to float within a contained chamber and offer a protection in that regard. We looked at an option of within the river channel, and the section you see in there at the bottom is effectively building this on the face of the existing wall. Quite a challenging piece of work to maintain a dry working environment in what is a tidal river, and obviously gets high water, whether there's a lot of flow in the river or not, at least twice a month. And substantial civil engineering works, sorry for the abbreviation, but substantial civil engineering works on the line of the cycle path. And clearly an impact in working in the river, on the river environment. But it does obviously retain all the parking on the riverside ultimately, once the construction works is complete. So we then look to develop two alternatives based on the options I've just sort of I've kicked through there. And the first one is the concept of a raised walkway. We call that the charrette-led design because it picks up on the idea of sort of improvements in the public realm in the area of the car parking between north of the Suspension Bridge, Assembly Street north to Buccleuch Street Bridge. And a self-rising barrier, rather than in the river itself, rather on the face of the wall, but set back from the river's edge. The self-rising barrier design looks, I mean, that's just a sort of couple of visuals that we've pulled together. We progressed it on the basis of having a wall offering a level of protection, which would be then incorporate the self-rising barrier, which would come up between the posts as and when required by high river levels. With the raised walkway design, what you'll see from the top picture is we've tried to indicate the difference between the original profile of the embankment, which is the dotted line that kind of runs up. It's maybe not very clear to see on the screen, but it can be seen on the boards. And then the lowered level of embankment with a reduced footprint, and the reduced footprint, the reduced sort of area that this takes up means that the buses that will be stopping on the Whitesands that would no longer have the bus turning area, the bus stances at the top of the Whitesands of the bridge, would now be stopping on a northbound carriageway. But all of that can be retained within the area that is the West Car Park. And the consequences of that are, in terms of addressing some of the parking concerns, is that the roadway stays exactly as it is, its current line. And the east side car park, the one in front of the shops, the 57 or so spaces within there remain as is. So that was just a couple of other visuals there. Maybe just flick back. That bottom one there shows a sort of lowered embankment from in the vicinity of the bottom of the Venel looking south, and that's given some ideas. So this was pulled together rather quickly, and some of the visuals are maybe not perfect at this sort of scale, but the bottom right-hand corner picture is looking at Devergilla Bridge with the removal of the public toilets from that location, and the bottom left-hand corner is within Dock Park, the concepts of walling and glass walling within the park area south of St Michael Street Bridge. So that's just a brief introduction of where we were.
Okay, thanks very much for that, James. Can I open it up to members? Obviously a very extensive and detailed report before members here with a lot of information, so I'm assuming there'll be a lot of questions. So can I open it up to members either on the report or the presentation? George.
There we go. Thanks, Chair. Just to clear up in my own mind, right at the very start of this process, James, or Alistair, or whoever, there was never an option, there was never a do-nothing option, was there? Was that ever an option which was put to the general public, or something similar to that effect? Was this always going to be, you're getting something whether you want it or not?
In terms of the way the project developed in the most recent years, obviously this has been around for consideration of Whitesands and flood protection has been around for a lot of time. But the development stages were on the back of the charrette process that was in 2012, and in that there were options considered which were a very high flood protection level, abandonment of all properties down there, so the removal of properties. As well as this was the option that came up with, but do nothing was I wouldn't say it was an option that was considered in great detail, but it certainly wasn't. It wasn't not an option on the table, but there was a feeling that it was more than just flood protection, so options were considered.
It's worth pointing out, obviously, when we carried out the consultation through Nistale Area Committee, the question was asked in the feedback form, do you want to see a flood protection scheme? And an overwhelming majority of people said that they wanted to see a flood protection scheme. Now, what scheme they wanted to see, that wasn't the specific question to that, but the majority of people did want to see action taken to tackle the problem. Okay, other members, questions? Finlay?
Thanks, Chair. I'd like to commend the team because you've pulled together, what did you say is a compromise. I'm concerned that this has been on the table for quite some time now. And each time we have a committee decision, it takes us further down the road to what ultimately looks like it is going to be some sort of bung and some sort of wall or whatever, which will reduce the visibility of the river from the Whitesands. My concern is this is a one-way street, and we're actually at no point, or every time we have a committee, it makes it more difficult to go back to the option that George just suggested, and that is we can't actually come up with anything that the public are willing to accept. Yep, and right at the very start of the process, they wanted a flood scheme, but they didn't actually realise what that entailed. And it would appear that what it entails is that the visibility of the river is going to be reduced quite dramatically with whatever scheme we come up with. And I'm concerned that if we make a decision today to go to further consultation on this project, it takes us another step away from what might be the solution that the public actually want. And that is a public realm improvement in the Whitesands, but nothing which would detract from the importance of the river within the Whitesands. And I'm concerned that the decision we make today might be a one-way street. We might not be able to go back and actually explore, once again, the possibility of not looking at a 1 in 25-year scheme, but something far less, which has far less visual impact on the river and the Whitesands.
That is, there's no point in stopping flooding that floods a wee car park. What the problem is the big floods that actually destroy people's houses in the Dock Park and actually flood premises. That's the problem we need to tackle. Now, it'd be very easy, I think, to go down, say, a 1 in 10-year solution, and that would mean that now and again the car park wouldn't flood. But when you get a big flood, it's going to, the one that actually does the damage, what do we do then? I mean, that's the big challenge we've got. What do we do then when people's houses are destroyed in the Dock Park because we haven't had a proper flood protection scheme in place, and people's shops are flooded out and there's no regeneration in the Whitesands because people won't invest there because it's the big floods that cause the damage, not the small ones. It would be very simple. Build a wall the height of the railings, that's fine. So when there's a bit of rain and a small flood, then it'll stop. A flood doesn't actually cause any damage anyway. But what do we do about the larger floods? I take on board what you say about it's important to get the visuals correct. But I think the challenge here is actually looking at what's being proposed in the visuals. Now, walk to the bottom of the Vennel and you tell me how high the wall is at the bottom of the Vennel. Tell me what the view's like at the top of Buccleuch Street when you've got a large public toilet, 3 metres high, blocking out your view then. Go along the Whitesands and look at all the heights of the walls. I think if we can get a proposal, and it doesn't matter what options you take forward that are on the table here, if you can get a proposal where the visuals are actually effectively either lower or the same height as what we've got there at the moment, then I think you tackle the problem. And I think that we're kind of getting towards that with the proposals here. So it's important that we're clear. And I think the difficulty is there's a lot of myths out there about particular ways forward and a lot of misinformation, particularly in the press. What we have to get to is a stage whereby people understand what's being proposed. Now, the two options there, one of them is about a walkway about 1.4 metres high, which is actually lower than some of the walls that are already in the Whitesands, and certainly a lot lower than the public toilets that are in place, and certainly a lot lower than the height of the cars and vans that are parked there at the moment. So we'll have to be very clear what we're actually proposing, and I think that's what the public consultation is about, rather than what some of the myths are. But I think at least we're in a position now where people understand that some of the so-called easy solutions around flooding upstream and dredging and all these things that were put forward, they're not options, because we know they're not going to tackle the problem. And we are at the stage now whether we want to actually regenerate the Whitesands and tackle the floods that actually cause the devastation, and that will involve, whatever option you take forward, some form of barrier, and it's about minimising, I think, the visual impact of that. So, we've got to be clear what that actually means, though, for people, and it is, in the revised scheme, a 1.4 metre high walkway, which frankly, I'm maybe slightly tall, but that's well below my height, I have to say, and that's certainly below some of the walls that are already within the Whitesands at the moment. So let's be clear what we're actually proposing here, not what some of the myths are about what people think we might be proposing.
Yeah, absolutely. I take all that on board, but what I'm still going back to is what we've got to make sure is that if this is a consultation, it doesn't take anything off the table. So, for example, if you've got, there's 6,500 people out there that have signed a petition who obviously got concerns against the big bung, and it's because they can't see the river. What we've got to make sure is that if there's a majority of the businesses in the Whitesands would rather have some other individual flood prevention solutions, so whether that's the sandbags or whether it's they make alterations to the premises so that they can actually, we take it on board, we're going to get flooded once every 25 years, but my business is going to be prepared for that. But I would far rather have that than actually the detriment to my business because people are not visiting the Whitesands because they can't see the river. I want to make sure that option's still not taken off the table, and we're not just consulting on the one project. We can still go back and say, right, actually, after consulting again, this solution is a lot better, and it absolutely is, but it's still not what the shop owners want or what the residents are prepared to live with.
The valid point. I think what needs stress is that no decisions have been made. This committee has not agreed to go ahead with a flood prevention scheme that's been finalised. I think that's important that people understand that. There are options on the table. We will require to get Scottish Government funding, and to be fair, the Scottish Government have indicated already this is a priority project for them, despite some of the coverage that they actually see this as being an important project. But it's up to this committee to decide, and this council to decide whether we take that forward, and that's the whole point of public consultation. I think there's a huge amount of work being done by officers from where we were recently to where we are today, and absolutely incorporating the feedback from the public consultation, I have to say. And I think there's some good options here, but actually what we're being asked to do today is to go up to public consultation on the refined options and actually get the feedback from there, and then it'll be entirely up to members how they want to take it forward after that. Absolutely. Okay, I've got Ian Dick, then Ian Crothers, then Patsy.
Could I just ask for clarification that the minutes of the Nithsdale Area Committee at 6.5 said that it was requested the EAT Committee, the views of the public would be taken into account and a compromise solution sought. That doesn't appear to be reflected in 3.14 or 3.15 in relation to the discussions at the Nithsdale Area Committee. Could I just get clarification on that?
Of 3.14 and 3.15.
Well, it was talking about the visual impact of high defences and perceived loss of parking, and the point was made by one of the members that didn't seem to be an accurate reflection of the Nithsdale Area Committee. And I mean, I might be wrong, but I couldn't actually find the decision at 6.5 the Nithsdale Area Committee reflected in the report.
Certainly the wording's not in the report, that's correct. But I think the clear sentiment and view of members at Nithsdale Area Committee is that the report that came before members today needed to tackle the concerns that were raised by the public, and the two main concerns were the visual impact of the defences and the perceived loss of car parking, and a solution that tackles those problems is what we want to see coming forward. So I think that the report covers what we certainly agreed at Nithsdale Area Committee, although I appreciate the actual wording's not in the report, I haven't noticed it But certainly the feedback from the committee is definitely reflected in this report. Okay, I've got Ian Crothers and then Patsy.
Thanks, Chairman. As I opened up this report and started to read it initially, I went through it the usual way I did, and when I got to 2.4, I realised that's where we're making the decision on a fair to 3.37, 3.38, and then I think there's 5 options outlined within the report, but we're focusing on 2, is from what I can understand there. Some of the figures that I've looked at in regards to what contained within the appendices, there was a public event held in Leicester Hall over Castle Street a few months back now, certainly, where a certain organisation came up and they presented to the public at large there. There was a few members of the council, and it was outlined at that point there was potential of a self-rising barrier type, similar to what was at Cockermouth, could be built and constructed, including, it would take into consideration all the wastewater treatment, reflux valves, and all the mitigation work that needed to be developed around about that as well, for in or around the region of £9 million. This was clearly indicative. It wasn't precise by any means, but I would have thought it would have been within 10, 15, maybe even 20% of what they could have actually delivered that. So, and when we get to this here, it's what seems to be, certainly look through the report, it looks like it's been reflected near 18 million, what they were proposing at the time. So there's clearly a difference of opinion between the people who actually build, construct and put these things on the ground. They're saying they can deliver it for a much lesser price than that. We've brought in consultants and they've looked at it, done a bit of number crunching, looked at design standards, I would imagine, and put this together, and it's reflected within the appendix. So when I see that, I was a wee bit perturbed, you could say, in regards to the conflict. It was such a large amount, it was 100% a difference. But when I again reflect back to the recommendations that are there, I mean, I think it's absolutely so important because of the level of community buy-in in the Whitesands, Dumfries and further regeneration, and it's wider field. People in Annan complain to me about what we're proposing, how it's been developed and so on and so forth, and between Annan and Forth, Crotherstone, Dalton, all over the bit when I got to different community councils, we're very much against what's been mentioned here. The one thing that the community and the public seem to be behind is this rising barrier that is fixed in close proximity to the river wall itself. Why is that not here as an option to at least go out and consult? I mean, the actual figures, you could say, well, it's 18 million, that's far too much, or between 18 and 21 or 22 million. Is that the case? I'd like to see that being bottomed out, because we've been told differently from a different organisation. The company that actually would build, design and construct this can do it for half the price as what's been indicated within the paper. So I've got some concerns in regards to the figures, what's been put in front of us. I think it's using numbers that have been crunched in regards to specific design standards. And I think we should definitely, when it comes to 2.4, be looking at what's the likelihood of, at least going forward in consultation, we should be putting to the public, what's their preference? The bund with a wall. We didn't see it in full when it comes to the presentation. We see something of a similar with the actual, the glass panels would be up, and we should actually see that the third, and probably the most important, what the public seems to be behind, is the wall, the self-rising wall, which is directly adjacent to the river side itself. So, Chairman, that's my thoughts on this as a starting point.
I'll certainly ask James to come in and clarify some of the position around figures, because it's very easy for people to pluck figures out of the air. But what the report we've got before you is actually costed figures from independent groups that have been working with the council. There's more than one organisation and more than one company produces self-activating flood barriers. But I think it is important that we do have robust figures. And I think, unfortunately, what we've had in the public domain in recent months in the media is figures that are frankly plucked out of the air, to be perfectly honest with you. So I think it is important to have figures. We've got detailed figures here before us. I don't know if James wants to add particularly what was excluded from some of the figures within the public domain that are actually now reflected in this report before us.
Just before you go on, and you're saying about the figures being plucked out of the air, you know, I've never ever seen anything from this film, or what we call them, about any details about, you know, costings, detailed costings about the figure that's been bandied about, you know, by, you know, Ian's bandied one about £9 million. I've never seen any detail about any costed figures around about that and what that entails. I do know that, you know, that film came down and they've just plucked that out there as far as I can see, because They didn't say to me that this is what you'll get for your £9 million. They'll say that's what it cost. These figures in front of us now are costed. They are detailed figures, and they're quite reliable. And I think the officers have put these figures in good faith here, and I don't want these undermined by anybody saying that these aren't correct.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, in terms of the figures that are presented in the report, we've undertaken, the design team has undertaken discussion with a supplier of the barrier type that we've shown on the screen there, the self-rising barrier. Obviously, in respect of providing a self-rising barrier, there's clearly a cost in the product itself, but there's also a substantial cost in installation and particularly installation on the riverside. If we look at the option that we've shown up there at the end there of setback from the river's edge about 5 metres, to install a barrier that rises to, let's say, 2 metres high, needs a depth of excavation to allow for the structure below the concrete tank in which this sits, or the steel tank which is then surrounded by concrete in which this sits, because you'll appreciate the floating barrier works by being effectively a bath of water under the ground, or an empty bath that when the water gets in, when the rising water gets in, this fills the bath and the barrier floats, and it's a very clever, very innovative solution. But it obviously requires quite a lot of underground works to do that. It's about 1.5 times the depth of the barrier height that's required below the sort of at-rest position of the barrier. So there's quite a lot of excavation work involved in that, quite a lot of trench support, and you're working close to a river where you're going to get some ingress. If you are working in the river itself, maintaining that as dry, particularly during high tide events, which are going to occur twice a month, you're going to get water in there. You're going to need to keep these excavations dry. Structural integrity and ensuring that once this is in, it doesn't suffer from failure in terms of structural loading from the weight of the water against it, means that additional civils works needs to be done to prevent the overturning. So we've worked with our quantity surveyor in pulling together prices on that, and we've also sought input beyond just the supplier of this kind of product from a heavy civils contractor that has done work for the authority in water environments to try and produce a robust price for this work. It's not anything but trying to get an accurate figure on what these are, and that's the figure we've reached through this work.
Can I just refer Councillor Crows to page 387, Appendix 5, the detailed costings there.
Yeah, I mean, there is figures there for the two detailed options, and I don't. I mean, are you saying, Ian, you think that somehow a self-raising barrier within the river will be cheaper than a self-raising barrier 5 metres back from the river? I mean, notwithstanding the engineering challenges that brings, but are you actually saying that somehow a self-raising barrier will be cheaper if it's in the river than 5 metres back? Because obviously the figures are here, the detailed figures are here with the option for a self-raising barrier that range between 18.8 million and 22.3 million, notwithstanding, of course, that anybody that knows Dumfries will understand that a lot of the flooding doesn't come from the river itself. It comes from the sewage, comes up through people's toilets and their buildings and all sorts of things, and that's going to cost several £1 million to tackle. Sticking a barrier up in the Whitesands is not going to tackle that problem on its own, and several £1 million of these costs are around the work that will have to be required around the sewage system itself. But are you indicating that you think that somehow it'll be cheaper to build a self-raising barrier in the river rather than 5 metres back from the river?
That's not what I'm saying, Chairman. No, that's absolutely not. I've been in construction and civil engineering my whole life, and it's not one thing I'm saying. I don't know what experience you got in regards to that. But what I am saying, and what I've said previously, that was information put out in a public meeting where many members from the council attended, that this solution could be costed and built for approximately half the price. That's what I said. So let's be quite clear about that. I'm not saying it could be built in regards to what you said. And I'm very aware of the information, Jeff, when it's seen. I read through it, and that's where I've seen the costings. Why is it not being referred to in here? I'd like to see further information and further investigation in regards to that. I mean, I think There's a question lies right over the top of it. You've got the aspirations of the business sector right across the Dumfries Sands, and that should be, Ken, as long with the public. You've got the wider regeneration issues that will come through this as well. The money should be best spent in the best possible way we can. I'm not saying we rule out the other two. I'm saying that we include in as part of the consultation the third option, what I mentioned earlier. That's what I'm saying, nothing else.
But I'll come back to the point again, Ian. Are you seriously saying that the information in this report, which gives you a breakdown, a detailed breakdown of a flood barrier, I mean, the reality is the feedback that came from the public consultation indicated some people with a desire to see a self-raising barrier. Officers took that information away, got independent costings for a self-raising barrier project, not just plucking figures out of the air that some people did, but actually taking that information forward and getting it properly costed. And that information is contained before us here, so the work has been done on the detailed costings. So what information is missing from the detailed costings? The report refers to the self-raising barrier within the river itself and all the engineering challenges that would bring. And the reality that is likely to cost significantly more than a self-raising barrier 5 metres back, given the engineering challenges. There's no information here at all that suggests anything other than that, and certainly nothing that you've said suggests anything other than that. So are you seriously saying that you think it would be cheaper to go down that particular option? Because we need to put out in the public domain accurate figures, and that's what we've got in the report, not just figures that are plucked out of the air.
Chairman, I'm certainly not saying that. I've said that again. I'm not going to repeat that answer. But what I do feel coming from yourself is that the information that you're saying, that the information was put out at that meeting, it was false and misleading. That's certainly what I'm feeling for yourself. And you're saying that in the public domain as well.
Say that the information was not detailed with detailed costings. There had been no detailed costings given, which is what we've got before members here. There was no information at all in the challenges we have when it comes to tackling the sewage works and the flooding that caused by that. There was no information there at all. It's not about whether figures were accurate, it's whether or not there was any information with those figures, and the reality is you don't know the detail of those figures, and when the detail has been worked up, the figures are before us here today. Now, the reality is if you wish detailed figures on the costing of putting a self-raising barrier, then I'm sure that can be worked up by officers. But nobody in here should be in any doubt that it's going to cost an awful lot more than the 18 million before us for a self-raising barrier 5 metres back from the river. I think that it's pretty explicit in the report that would be the case. So we shouldn't pretend that there's somehow a cheaper option out there. We have to be honest with the public and actually tell them what the cost of those options would be.
Chairman, if you were a chartered civil engineer, I would take on board what you're saying, but you're not professionally qualified to say what you just said. So I'm not got to take on board what you're saying.
I think, Ian, you find out that the report is actually prepared by civil engineers who know an awful lot more about flooding than I do, and certainly what you do. But if you want to see detailed figures around that option, and maybe we'll start to kill off some of the myths around it, then by all means do that. But do not question the integrity of the officers that have brought these figures before us.
I'm not questioning the integrity of the officers, Chairman, so don't say that.
With all due respect, Ian, I'm speaking. You can have your say in a second, okay? Do not question the integrity of the figures before us here.
I'm not questioning the integrity of the officers at all. And so don't say I am when I'm not.
Well, the figures are before us. If the committee wishes to see detailed figures around an option that I think the report talks about the big engineering challenges around, then by all means we can bring those figures forward. But do not start pretending to the public that somehow that's a cheaper option, because there's absolutely no evidence whatsoever to substantiate that statement at all.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll respond, and I'm not pretending to the public. There may well be cheaper options there, and I think it's a viable proposal. And we get to recommendation 2.4, I think it is. I think we should take that seriously and put it forward as a part of the consultation.
Okay, can I bring in Patsy?
Okay. I need a little bit of help because I am not a civil engineer and in any shape or form. And so I'm looking at your raised walkway, which was the last thing you brought forward, James. And does that have the self-raising barrier within it or behind it or next to it or not at all? Is it just the raised walkway that you're talking about, which seems to keep the car parking but maybe isn't so good for the visual? Would that be right?
The raised walkway doesn't have a self-rising barrier within it. The raised walkway provides a level of protection, but to provide a further level of protection up to the one in 25 to the one in 75 is with this glass parapet, not dissimilar to you'd find in a shopping centre, and as is used in the Keswick scheme.
So just so I can understand, is that on the walkway or is it behind it, or where are we? Yes, this is what we needed. was back from that, I think. There, something like that. It's on the top of it.
I'll
And how would that affect the visual? You know, and not when the, I mean, obviously it's not good when the thing's up, it's not there very often, once in a blue moon, but the walkway, how would that impact on the visual?
The walkway that you're seeing there at the top of the screen is a typical example there. So the walkway itself is around about the 1.4 metres high. So I'm 1.8 metres high. So it's lower than my height. You can see the person standing on the roadside beside the bus stop, sort of kind of looking across. And on top of that is this glass parapet, glass barrier. So it's like a handrail you get across a bridge, but instead of being solid, it would be glass, and that would be permanently on top. So it addresses two specific issues. One is obviously it provides a level of flood protection because these glass panels are designed and used in these cases. But also there were questions raised at during the public engagement about the sort of walking along the top there and having side slopes. They're not steep side slopes, but having a parapet there and something people can be adjacent to maybe offers that sort of further confidence like that.
So sorry, just so I can understand. So these this raised walkway would have self-raising panels, or no, they're permanent. Why could they not be self-raising because you've lifted the walkway up, which would give you a bit more room to go down, or do you need to have the whole glass panel in water in order for it to be activated to work?
I mean, the potential would be to have what's shown on the screen there with a self-rising barrier built into it and coming up. But the permanency of the glass barrier along the top there, it gives a robustness that doesn't rely on anything. It's there permanently. It's like having a wall along the top of the embankment, but it's glass.
Anything else? How long would you envisage? Say we went for that, for argument's sake. How long would that take to implement?
The construction time, yeah. It's a question we get asked quite a lot, and it is quite a challenging one to answer. I think what I would say on the construction time is we've kicked around the sort of 1.5 years construction time for a scheme of this nature. There needs to be a balance between how much we blitz this as a project. Do you do it and target every single location on the project? So that's starting as far south as the pizzeria in Dock Park, all the way up to the standard office in the Greensands. Do you stick 200 or 300 operatives working on that project the whole length plus the other side of the river, and do it in 9 months to a year, and the vast disruption that obviously causes? Or do you manage it over a longer period of time and thus reduce the disruption? And I think that level of detail would be something that we would look to detail up with a successful contractor, possibly even through early contractor involvement in that kind of work. We want to provide, if we lose the parking, we want to be able to provide it somewhere else during the construction period. So it's making sure that these balances are there. So that's the sort of time frames as my experience would suggest. Okay.
Can I bring in Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just looking at the raised walkway, which you're calling the charrette-led design, and I see where Councillor Gilroy's coming from. Why couldn't you put a raising barrier in there? That would be a third option. I hear what Councillor Carruthers is saying, but the real difficulty would be to build the barrier right beside the river. You've got severe problems with the river itself. So I can actually see, at the minute, two alternatives. You've got the raised walkway as it sits there. You also have the self-raising wall. Is there any reason why you couldn't incorporate both? There's also the other option of Councillor Carson's is, do the public, once they know all the figures, actually want anything done? The recommendations, when we come to them, I'm not sure 2.3 is actually valid. If we're going to public engagement sessions with different options, because there's nothing in 2.4 that actually says what options we're actually going to, and I would have an alternative or an addition to wording to 2.4.
Yeah, I mean, just picking up on the first point there, Councillor, the concept of a raised, a self-rising barrier within the walkway is, it's feasible engineering-wise. I mean, I would like to think, and as the arrogance of a civil engineer, anything's feasible engineering-wise. But what we're trying to balance up there then is the costs of a permanent glass barrier, where in terms of long-term sustainability for it, you're looking at a piece of infrastructure that's visible all the time. Any issues in terms of ongoing maintenance will be much more apparent. The raised barrier comes with more underground civils works to rise, so there will be an increased cost in combining the raised walkway with a rising barrier as well. But yeah, I mean, it's an achievable option. I'll defer maybe to others on the do we want to see anything at all. I think that's in terms of where the project sits. You'll see from the final appendix in the report that the cost benefit for the project, which is a crucial element in obtaining Scottish Government funding, identifies that there's a pretty strong cost benefit. Members will recall in July that this project sits reasonably well within the national prioritisation for flood protection schemes in Scotland for the period 2016 to 2021. And as much as they know how much money they have to spend on schemes coming up, Whitesands will be one where based on the information to date, there would be funding available for a project. So, do nothing as an option, but there is a positive cost benefit on this.
Yeah, I know there is a positive cost benefit, and let me say, having worked for several years in Dumfries and had to deal with the water coming over and making sure everybody was out the road and all the rest of it, I can see why we need the flood protection. However, if we have options to lay in front of the public, the Charette lead, the self-raising wall, a combination of both, or the do nothing option, it then comes down to what the public actually want. And if the public don't want us to spend the money, they will ultimately have to take the consequences of that.
Okay, John, did you want to come in?
It's just on the thing itself, but the difference between the self-rising barrier and the permanent, the embankment with the wall. Ongoing maintenance costs, surely they would be far greater if you've got a self-rising barrier, because they would surely need to be checked in a very regular time, that it's got to rise up when you get a flood. Because if one of the sections didn't rise up, completely pointless. So I take it the ongoing maintenance costs have been costed into any self-rising barrier as well. And just the other thing, like, it's not just the businesses in Dumfries, in the Whitesands that are affected when there's a flooding and the Whitesands is closed. The whole of the town, you get completely gridlocked, and I've heard for some of the major businesses in the town, like your Marks and Spencer's, Boots and that, at their businesses, their actual business drops about 70% when the Whitesands is closed. So it's not just really the businesses that actually suffer the damage on the Whitesands, it's a complete economic, or the rest of the businesses in the town, they suffer as well.
I mean, with regards to the maintenance costs, that is quite a crucial element of it. Certainly the view of that we have taken on in terms of maintenance, and the guidance we've got from the supplier we've been dealing with, who not only supplies self-rising barrier but also the glass panels, is the maintenance cost for the glass panels is considerably lower. Glass panels are quite, as you can appreciate, quite solid pieces of glass. They're not just your window glass designed for an impact load, which isn't the same as a flood load against it. A flood load is pretty uniform, whereas an impact load would be like being hit with, it's almost as though it's bulletproof glass. It's that kind of nature of design. The thing about the glass parapet option is that everybody is going to see that this is in place and able to function, or if there is concerns about it, it's, you know, it's quite noticeable that there's a problem. I think the self-rising barriers are a very simple design that, you know, it's reflected in one of the paragraphs in the report that it's not a fault of anyway of a supplier of this kind of product, but anything that requires moving parts is obviously going to, you know, even in this level of moving parts, you know, may at some point over 100-year design life be more susceptible to not working over that. It's finding that balance between. So I think there will need to be a lot of testing to prove these things come up on a regular basis. Whereas I think with the glass panels, you're going to see them permanently. They're going to be there. You're going to have confidence that, I mean, it's just a glass version of something we've been doing for hundreds of years.
Can I just ask, if we did use or go for an option with the self-rising barriers on the raised walkway design, would that not rule out the use of the removable extra flood prevention? Would the two of them work together? Because you talked about one of the solutions where you have the glass panels and then you have additional, another metre high or whatever, detractable protection. Would that not be ruled out if you had self-rising barriers on top of the bung?
I must mishear you sometimes, Councillor, because I keep thinking he's saying bung and bund. It's got a G, not a D, not a G. That's all right. Consent as bungs being mentioned, particularly when we're recorded. Yeah, the self-rising barrier design would be to the height of the full level of 1 in 75. The option shown on the screen at present is to permanent to 1 in 25 with demountables above. The 1 in 25 is still a reasonable height, obviously, and obviously a reasonable level of protection. I suppose one thing I perhaps didn't pick up on too much previously, if I just take this opportunity to say that clearly there's going to be, you know, whatever defence mechanism we put down there is going to be a visual impact of you know, that shows there in a raised walkway with glass panels on the top. If we put in a self-rising barrier along that route as well, then there needs to be mechanisms to support this barrier as it comes up in panels. But you know, the length of barrier between the panels are a certain length, and will depend. The length of these panels will depend on how high they are, because of the way that it takes a load, and wave my hands around here, but the way it takes a load and transfers that load into the ground is on vertical posts that will be there. So if the panels are sort of 2 meters high, then the post spacing is going to be much closer together, or they're going to be much larger posts, which will be permanently there to guide these self-rising barriers up. So, you know, it is kind of swings and roundabouts. You've got different options there, but there's always going to be a visual impact of whatever you put in terms of flood defences down there.
So basically, what you're saying is that if you go with the permanent walkway, that glass barrier would be about a metre high. But if you were wanting a self-raising barrier on top of the walkway, instead of that, it would have to be about 1.5 metres high, the actual pillars that come out of the ground, because basically you don't have the 0.5 metre high demountable to go on top, basically.
That would be correct based on this, yes. The demountables that go on top to provide this extra level from the 1 in 25 up to the 1 in 75 would be installed, including their posts, along the top of the glass panel is effectively a new post slotted in on top of the existing post with, like, you know, boards placed in between, not as simple as that.
Okay. Jeff? Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. And coming back to the costings and Appendix 5, if you look at page 391 and 387, the actual flood prevention works in both of those. In one case, it works out about 4.5 million, and the other one for the rising barrier, it works out at around about 6 million. So I think we're losing sight of this to a certain extent. This is also regeneration of the Whitesands. It's not just preventing flooding, it's actually regenerating that area. An awful lot of this other costings and ancillary works in terms of improving the area with regard to that. And just give me some idea of the scale. I mean, we're talking about between 10 and 15 metre wide panels, rising panels. So a 10 metre wide one would be about the width of the hall here, and a 15 would be about the length of that. We're going to have between 70 and 100, depending on which option we go down. Is there any chance of failure of these?
I don't know how to answer that question. It is a simple design, the self-rising barrier, and that's always going to be to its advantage. We're looking at, as we said, 100-year design life for a flood protection scheme, and that's how the cost-benefit works are done to show that it's achieves a positive cost-benefit. Over a kilometre of, there's going to be a lot of panels. I guess there is the potential that a damaged column and not realised might cause a jamming of a mechanism coming up, but that would require regular testing to ensure that they worked every time. You would want to do reasonably frequent testing of the barriers to ensure. You need to maintain the underground tanks to ensure that they remain watertight, because over a long period of time, if they start leaking water, concrete through the joints and such like, then there's potential these things will float and rise when they're not wanted. So you need to ensure water tightness for a long period of time. I don't think it's I just think it's an issue with anything. You're always going to have a potential for something to go wrong. I think you need to work on that on a risk basis. Just my professional opinion is that on a risk basis, it's more obvious to spot problems with something that's permanently visible than something that you rely on working. That's not in no way a criticism of this product. Let me make that very clear. But that's my professional opinion as an engineer.
Okay, can I bring in Craig?
Thank you, Chair. Just to sort of try and cover a few of the points that's been debated here this afternoon. Firstly, in regards to any of the options that we may be considering, the report before us tells us that 80% of all those people who we consulted with have agreed that there needs to be some sort of flood protection scheme. So, I mean, I think that proves that we need to do something about it, and the do nothing option doesn't really apply, because if 80% of the people are looking for some sort of works to be carried out, then we have to be taking that forward. Secondly, whichever option is decided upon from this committee moving forward, and James touched on it there, because there's been a lot of talk about the visual impact, especially of the walkway. There will be a visual impact from whatever option is taken forward. The rising barriers, you have to have a metre high wall to start with as a base for that, and then you have to have the 2 metre high steel girders every sort of 10 to 15 metres right along the length of the sands and through into the dock park. So whichever option is decided upon from the committee, there will be a visual impact. And we have no way of getting out of that. Something that hasn't been talked about through the different options is with the walkway, the raised walkway option. That is not just flood protection, but it also allows it to have public usable space. If we go for a rising barrier, there would be no public usable space from that option. So that is another cost benefit that I would think needs to be considered when it goes out to public consultation. And again, when it comes down to the costings of the schemes, at the end of the day, whichever option is decided on going forward, it's looking as if this council's contribution towards that option would be in the region of £3 million, as 80% of that, whichever option would come from Scottish Government. So we as a council would be looking in the region of £3 million to put towards those schemes. So There's a few points here that haven't been talked about, but need to be. But I think the public realm aspect of it is going to have as much benefit to the people of Dumfries as anything else. And just another point, actually, the raised walkway option gives us the opportunity to tackle some of the accessibility options, especially disabled accessibility options, along some of the routes here with the Dervergill Bridge, etc., like that, which at the moment I know is a problem in some cases. With a solid wall going along the length and the rising barrier, that option would not exist to us either. So, these sort of points need to be considered as well, not just on a financial cost of the project and that. So I think there's other things there that we need to look into as we're moving this forward.
Any other members? No. Okay, can we go to the recommendations then? Okay, are members happy to note 2.1? Okay. Are members happy to note 2.2? Okay, we're happy to note 2.3. Jim, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm perfectly happy that the officers are of the opinion that the opt-in solution would be the charrette-led design. However, to 2.3, I would propose that we just say note that as detailed in paragraph 3.32 to 3.36, the developed raised walkway charrette design option, because if you then go to 2.4, it looks as if that's the only option that we're going to go to public consultation.
So is that a case of changing the wording in 2.4 rather? Because I mean, obviously, what 2.3 is simply asking us to do is to note the position of officers, which is a perfectly valid thing. It's contained within the report at 3.32 and 3.36. But obviously, we need to make it clear that that's not only what's going out to public consultation. Is that really the point?
Yeah, Chair, that's really the thrust of it. I would suggest possibly adding in after seek public views. I would put on alternatives, including charrette-led design and the self-raising wall. I would also, you can't put it in the recommendation, but the points that Councillor Peacock brought up are perfectly valid about public realm. If we try and get costings for public realm improvements that we would get with the charrette-led into the self-raising wall one as well.
Tell me which part you're amending again, sorry.
Yeah, it would read, agree to further public engagement sessions to be undertaken at town centre location. I would possibly also suggest an online.
Yep.
And to seek public views on alternatives, including the charrette-led design and the self-raising wall.
Yep.
And then carry on from there, and with the deletion of at the end as detailed in 3.37 and 3.38, because that makes it look as if we're only going for the charrette-led design.
Yep. Members happy with that? Finlay?
Chair, I think for the benefit of transparency, it may not be a view that's held by the councillors, but there's certainly an opinion out there held by some people that we're being railroaded into into making a decision, and the options are becoming fewer as we go through public consultation. I think it's important that the option is just to improve the public realm, but to enhance the current flood prevention scheme is still an option. So if after public consultation the preferred option we're getting just now is still not acceptable, we can go and look at how we can improve the public realm and just enhance the flood prevention schemes we've got going at the moment. I think it's important that that's not taken off the table, if nothing else, to make sure the public realise this is still open and we're not heading to a, we're being led down a road that they maybe don't want to be on. I think that still needs to be clear in the recommendations.
Jim?
Yeah, Chair, I specifically said on alternatives, including, that does not preclude anything that if the members of the public in Dumfries and anybody else that takes part in the consultation don't want to do anything, it doesn't preclude that being included in the public consultation.
I mean, no reason whatsoever why in that the word in the consultation that having looked at the options, if people decide they don't want to take any of the options, then they can certainly put that in their feedback. There's no question about that. Alistair?
I think it's absolutely imperative, sir, as you've already indicated, that we must retain recommendation 2.3 as it exists. This, to me, embodies the views of the professional officers whose function and role it is to guide this committee, and it's imperative that it's kept like that. In relation to 2.4, sir, I would agree with Jim McClung insofar as agree a further public engagement session be undertaken at a town centre location and online to seek public views that will assist in informing the decision on progression of a flood protection and public realm improvement scheme for Whitesands, and I would leave it at that, at Whitesands. And then that way you're giving the maximum amount, as it were, of possible alternatives within the parameters, Chair, of 2.3.
No, but I think we're clear that it's more than one option that's being consulted on. And the reality is, I think what's important is that what's missing is that there were 5, if you like, refinements put on the table, and you could argue 6. There was the original draft proposal. There was the option 1 that was looked at was simply to reduce the embankments by about, I think, a metre. Then there was the option of effectively doing away with embankments and having a raised walkway. And then there was the option, which is the one that the officers believe is the most optimal, was actually not only having the walkway, but actually reducing the footprint of that walkway, because that then frees up additional car parking spaces. In addition to that, there was the rising barrier within the river, and there was a rising barrier 5 metres back. So there's a range of refinements that have been looked at, and a lot of detailed work taking place. And I think it's important that all that work and the different, if you like, I don't want to say options, because some of them are frankly not options, because people won't want them. But I think all that information about the different refinements that have been looked at needs to be part of the public consultation as well, so people can see what the different refinements are. It's not just, about the final options. There's a reason why we've got to 2 particular options, but there are other refinements, and that information needs to be in the public domain as part of the consultation. Alistair?
I'll go with that for the record, Chair.
Okay. Patsy, did you want to come in?
When Alistair said it was in the perimeters of 2.3, that's very narrow. That was just the optimum one, which is fine. We've been given that, but I think the public need to be given other things as well.
Yeah. Members happy with that? Yeah. Okay, Ronnie, sorry.
I'd mind up well. Anyway, I always thought the recommendations reflected the report, and we're sort of getting away from it. It's quite clear in any process, the closer you get to end point, your options get less and less and less. But just correct me if I'm wrong, the officers have come back with an amended report, or what was proposed before, taken on board the public's concerns to try and refine that. So this keeping it open-ended, it's never going to be a reality. The further you get down that road, the less options you're going to have. It's coming down to 1 or 2. So, let's not kid ourselves on. These recommendations are leading us to a final yes or no type scenario, and that's the way it should be.
Sorry, Ian, do you want to come back in?
Thanks, Chairman. Just in regards to, if we're moving on to recommendation 2.4, we're going back to the points that I made earlier. I mean, the only thing I'd like to see in regards to that is at the end of 3.37 to 3.38, that I would ask that we do include that further, which I don't specifically see what was being regarded, what was being mentioned earlier, 3.32 to 3.36, is the potential of putting a self-rising barrier adjacent to the river wall that's already there as it goes down through. I'd like to see that as being an option. We've got questions on it, but I'd like to see it specifically as an option. Unless it's already included in the 10 parts that are there, 3.32, 3.36.
Okay, can I ask for members' views on that? If you look at, obviously, paragraphs 2.25 and paragraph 2.26, it obviously outlines the issues that are apparent: significant temporary works to keep the construction area dry, increased risk of damage to the temporary permanent works, significant works to take down the existing wall, tidal environment which increases risk of long-term damage to the structure, environmental impact upon the river, the requirement to remove the historic riverside wall, the increase in long-term maintenance costs, and this option not being progressed. I mean, are you arguing that should be progressed now? Is that based, despite obviously the information that's here, you think that option should be progressed?
Sorry, say that again, Chairman. I can't hear. Be precise where you're talking.
I'm reading paragraph 3.25 and 3.26. Obviously, the self-raising barrier within the river. Obviously, self-raising barriers effectively within the river have been used in the past in areas where effectively the road reaches the river. We don't have that problem, fortunately, at the Whitesands, because there is space between the river itself and the road. And that's obviously why the proposal is to have a self-raising barrier 5 metres back rather than within the river itself. And the reason why officers are suggesting having it actually within the river itself might not be the best way forward is set out in paragraph 3.25 and 3.26. Now, you could certainly get that costed. I think we're under no illusions that that would be, notwithstanding all the engineering challenges that officers have set out for us, that would be probably the most expensive option. But if you want that drawn up,
I would much prefer that, Chairman, and in that way, if the price accordingly rolls it out, then it rolls it out. It should be something that is put forward to the public, certainly, so they can consider that and see what the best option is. I mean, it retains the level of car parking down there as it stands. If that option was to be built in, the bulk of the car parking that's still there, I think that would be a saving in the future in regards to any further purchase that we may well take. That's part of I think would be the arguments that goes forward, but it retains what's there already. And if it'll be either rolled in or rolled out, but the public at least get their chance. I know there's certainly a will from the public that they'd like to see that coming forward as an option. And if the cost is far too great, then that's it. It'll be dealt with and a decision to be made in regards to flood protection and the Whitesands at a future committee date. I don't see why we should rule it out. Like you're saying, the option actually as a group, we could actually ask for that to be costed up anyways. It's only fair that the whole committee and the whole council sees that.
Chair, could I ask as well, that Councillor Cuthers, even though, it's laid out in the report about all the disadvantages of doing that, he did mention earlier on about regeneration. Which part of the regeneration, do you want on top of that? Obviously that'd just be a barrier and that'd be it. But he did mention regeneration is important earlier on in the committee. And, what other things would you like on top of that, as well as the rising barrier as part of the regeneration? Would we need to cost that as well on top of that?
That was subject to the costings that come back, Chairman. The costings come back, depending on how much that defence itself costs on an individual basis, then whatever's left in regards to what's been proposed by the other proposals, then that can be taken into consideration and worked up for any potential realm works or even going further up into High Street.
So
flood protection is what we're actually looking at this moment in time.
So no, we're not, and you said that yourself. You said it's about regeneration as well. You said that at the start of this item is regeneration. Now,
Councillor Cuthers, can you let people speak other than yourself? Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. So I'm just trying to get the idea of what we're actually wanting in here, because after all the the implications of putting that type of barrier up, and no matter what it costs, and you says we need to see now you've qualified that by saying we need to see what's left for regeneration. So if it costs £26 million, there's no money left for regeneration. You're quite happy with that. You're quite happy with a rising barrier with no regeneration in the sands as well, or no matter how much it costs, we need regeneration on top of that, as you've said yourself. So how much will you want to put into regeneration, and what type of scheme do you want costed up on top of that?
Seems a wee bit ridiculous, Chairman, if I can come in and comment back on that. I mean, we're looking at a flood protection scheme. This will be putting a bid into Scottish Government in regards to flood protection. That's the first basis of this whole report. Flood protection, Whitesands, regeneration will come thereafter. But what we've included in some of this is potential regeneration and economic benefit to the Dumfries and partly heading towards the town centre. First and foremost is the flood protection. That's what we're looking at, and that's why I'm asking for that particular flood design to be at least consulted on. That's it. It's a small request.
Chair, can I come back in here? One of the things that was in my mind, I live in Dumfries, and I've been through all this procedures as well, and I know people in Dumfries. And we've been through this. We've been through a charrette system, and as well, and we've been through consultation. And people do want regeneration. They want regeneration, not at any cost, but they want regeneration in that area. It's something that's very important to the town. And if we don't have regeneration in a town, that part of the town will wither and die if they just put a couple of barriers up, and that's it. So I think it's a perfectly legitimate question. If you want them rising barriers and the cost, and what type of regeneration in that area would you do you want costed as well? So I think that's perfectly legitimate to ask that.
Craig, do you want to come in?
Yes, Chair, thank you. Part of the issue with, I think, with the particular scheme is the within the river itself, in front of the wall, as you're indicating, Ian, is obviously throughout this whole process, and as you quite rightly say, I mean, this is about flood protection, and we're looking at flood protection options. And part of that process is, as a council and officers, we've been consulting with SEPA, because obviously they have to recommend the scheme that goes forward for Scottish Government fundings. And through the talks with them, they have strongly indicated to us that a rising barrier within the riverbed would not be an option. So, I mean, that is a major consideration that officers have to look at. And if SEPA would not support that, then there is no point in taking it forward.
Jeff?
Just for clarification, I think James said the design lifespan of this is 100 years. So we've got to build a structure right next to a river which is going to last 100 years. I mean, I'm thinking of sash windows. You know, a 100-year-old sash window was never going to survive, is it? So what we're talking about is a 40-foot wide sash window effectively built next to a river.
Built in the river, rather. Okay, I mean, the reality is that I think that one of the challenges we have, and I mean, I'd remind Ian that this is not just a flood protection scheme, this is a public realm improvement scheme as well. And the reason why it's a public realm improvement scheme is decisions taken by this council when you were in this chair, and you actually went through the charrette process, and we got the feedback from that charrette process, and that said that the public wanted to see regeneration of the Whitesands, not just a flood protection scheme. And this committee and the full council took decisions on that basis, and you were chairing these meetings when those decisions were taken. Now you appear to be implying that actually you don't want any public realm improvements, or you do, but they might be over and above the 20 million or whatever it may cost for purely a flood protection scheme. But I think it is important that we nail this once and for all, and we do start to dispel the myths. We've had a lot of myths, a lot of misinformation that's been put out there in recent months around the potential alternatives, and maybe one way to kill those myths off, that somehow there's a magic solution of a rising barrier that nobody's going to notice in the middle of the river, and it's going to be cheap. If we want to kill that off once and for all, and maybe we're wrong, maybe it is suddenly the cheapest option, then maybe actually getting the figures on that will actually dispel those myths once and for all, and we have a debate on that rather than some of the myths that are being put around. Ian, do you want to come in?
Thanks, Chair. Just in an effort to be helpful and draw this to a conclusion, can we note 2.3 and 2.4 as is, keep options open and come back with a recommendation, and agree 2.5, 6 and 7?
The reality is we want to go up to public consultation and get the views of the public on this. What I'm suggesting we do is that we've got effectively 5 refinements on the wall. We've got 2 that have been done in detail around the costings, that we get costings for the self-raising barrier within the river, and we look at all those issues that Craig has raised around the fact that whether SEPA would let this happen, all the various engineering challenges that have been mentioned in this report, notwithstanding the fact that the reason why people put self-raising barriers within rivers is because of restrictions they have, and we don't have those restrictions in the Whitesands because frankly we've got a car park between the road and the river. But notwithstanding all those issues, we get the detailed costings around a rising barrier within the river itself, and we include that as part of the discussions, and we try to nail these issues once and for all. Finlay?
Chair, I think your Vice Chair knocked the nail on the head there. If SEPA have indicated that this the barrier in the river is not going to be acceptable, if they've said that, and it's on record, that needs to be taken off the table because it can't be progressed.
Could we get clarification on where we are? Because I appreciate that, given engineering challenges, you might not have got right to the final discussions on that, but do you want to clarify where we are with that?
Yeah, in that respect, we've obviously, to progress the project to the stage where it's got to, we've undertaken a strategic environmental assessment on the Whitesands master plan previously, and commenced an environmental impact assessment. I apologise for all the terminology there, but environmental impact assessment for the raised waterway, or the embankment as it was, the option from January, on discussion with our the company that undertook the environmental impact assessment for us on the views of constructing within the river. The views back from them was that because there was alternatives that didn't require the construction in the river, the viable alternatives that didn't require construction in the river, and the potential environmental impacts of construction in the river, both within tidal waters downstream of the coal and upstream of the coal out with tidal waters, and the impacts on such like of the European protected species, the otter, and the name slips my mind, but the small fish that lives in the river as well. The likelihood is that there would be a strong objection to that as an option of construction within the river channel. But I mean, these things ultimately can only be tested if you progress it to these people will give you a view and opinion up to a point, but a lot of these things from bodies like SEPA, SNH, Scottish Government, will only be finally determined when you make that application. We will give planning advice, but it'll only be a planning committee that will make a decision. I hope that's helpful.
Absolutely. I think I'll go with my original proposal that we actually get the detail costed up. I mean, I think the engineering challenge are there for everyone to see. I think I have difficulty getting my head around the fact that given the fact that you can have a self-raising barrier a few metres away from the river, that somehow somebody would think it's a good idea to actually put it in the river instead. I have difficulty with understanding the rationale behind that, but if that's what members want, I think we get the detailed costings on that and we deal with that issue once and for all. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Seeing as it was me that started this. As regarding 2.3, I'm quite happy to leave it as it is. 2.4, I'm quite happy to actually, if necessary, second yours and go with town centre location and online to seek public views on alternatives, and that includes the 5 that you mentioned, plus, as we've discussed, if the public say no, the public say no.
I'm quite happy with that. And can I just ask, just for information from officers, how long do you think it would take to work up costing around a self-raising barrier within the river?
I feel like University Challenge when I'm turning to my team to answer the question. I don't think it's unrealistic. A couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, something like that. Yeah, that sort of order, and we can come back on that element.
I don't want to delay public consultation because the most important thing is actually finding out what the public think of the options. I think that if members are happy that we get those detailed costings in the same way we've got the 2 detailed costings here, and they are part of the public consultation. Ian?
Thanks, Chairman. Just in regards to public consultation, will it be back in November or will it be January time for the next report? Just touching on that point, I mean, I agree with you entirely, we need to consult properly. We have already done a lot of consultation, but when do you think we'll see us coming back for ultimately a decision?
Well, at the start of the meeting, November was the answer, but given the additional work that we're asking officers to do, that would still hopefully be the aim. I think what's also important to remind members is that we changed the standing orders to say that Industrial Area Committee should also be consulted as part of this process with any major capital project, so that will have to happen. But I think November should still be the target date, but notwithstanding additional information we're asking officers to come up with, whether that's still realistic. Yeah, okay, November would certainly be the target. Okay. Okay, members happy with that? Yeah, yeah, okay. Okay, all leave cancelled. Okay, 2.5 are members happy to note 2.5, an issue that's not been discussed is around parking, but that's obviously quite detailed in the report. Members happy to note 2.6? Okay, and 2.7? Okay, thanks very much. Turn now to item number 11. Okay, members, can we turn now to item number 11, which is on harbour management and operation, Port Marine Safety Code update for duty holders. Can I ask the Director if there's anything to add to the report before you?
Nothing to add to the report, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, can I open it up to members' questions? Alistair?
Thanks very much indeed, sir. It's page 447, talking about the proposed revised structure. And forgive me, Chair, I'm not been entirely parochial. Port William's included and it's not in my ward. But the 3 mid-Galloway area harbours, Garrison, Port William and Isle of Whithorn, the proposed revised structure, as far as I'm concerned, would appear to represent a significant diminution of resource in relation to these 3 harbours. Can I have that confirmed, first of all, sir, and then secondly, reason justified as to why that should be the case. Let me go back to what I said this morning when we were discussing item 5. I think at the end of the day, Chair, it's a good report. It does set out a raft of sobering responsibilities that devolve on us, and I think it's a nonsense that we should expect the committee as a whole to accept such responsibilities, and we should go down the route of a subcommittee, preferably of 7 members. Let me say for the record, I'll not be particularly anxious to serve on it, but that's neither here nor there. But as I say, the main thrust of my question at this moment is why the diminution in resource, because we're having issues, for instance, at the moment, Sir, James is probably well aware of them, Alistair certainly is, in relation to the state of Garliston Harbour. And, you know, I think it's imperative that we have, rather than looking at downscaling of resources, we should be ensuring, in fact, that what we've got there under the proposed revised structure is fit for purpose. Thank you, Chair.
James.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's, in terms of the reduction in hours for the staff at the 3 Marcus harbours, that's a piece of work that's been undertaken by our colleagues in DG First. So primarily Peter Roberts, before he retired, undertook a lot of work in this regard, spent a lot of time in the harbours and took much more of an overview. You'll be aware that in the past Peter was only involved with the Kakubri Harbour, but of laterally he took over a role across the 5 harbours. That's helped identify what the role of the harbour master is, or the harbour assistant is, in the 3 Marcus harbours, and where they would better be supported by you know, their counterparts in other harbours, and where the demands are on time. So what his views was that the 3 Marcus harbours, in terms of boats arrival and that side of things that a harbour assistant would be involved in, was actually quite limited, and in all honesty, there wasn't a vast amount for these people to do on their own, checking boats coming in and such like duties that they could manage individually. What better we can do is have big resources at our 2 main harbours, Stranraer, particularly with this increase in Marina and environment, and at Kakubri, and these will then support, and there will be 2 members of staff quite regularly travelling to the harbour. So although they may be based at Stranraer, they'll be travelling in pairs, which makes it obviously a safer working environment for them carrying out works at the various harbours. So I think this, you know, we've taken the best available guidance from Peter and subsequently from Keith to this. So I think it is an improvement, even though it may seem reduced hours.
I'm grateful to you, Chair. As far as I'm concerned, that's a perfectly acceptable and rational response, and I'm grateful to James for it. Can I make a suggestion, Chair, though, in an effort, again, to quote Ian Dick a few minutes ago, in an effort to be helpful? Can I suggest that when we do agree this, as I now hope that we do, that we are proactive and that we write to the 3 community councils involved and explain the situation just as succinctly and as cogently as James has to me or to the committee now, and make sure that they know that right from the off, Chair, and that will stop any misconceptions and complaints developing. I'll be grateful, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, quite happy to do that, absolutely.
Just a couple of things to do with Kakubri Harbour. I noticed the barriers are up, preventing vehicle access, James. Now, it was brought up at Kakubri Community Council the other night that when this was all out for consultation, it was agreed that barriers would be down in order to stop vehicle access and to really raise awareness for pedestrians that there was work going on within the harbour, but that they wouldn't be down when there was no boats in. And I was there the other night and there's no boats in, but the harbour, the barriers are down. So is that, I mean, that was not what was agreed. And the other, because that wouldn't have been agreed. And the other thing is, I'm looking at this incident that happened at the harbour. Was the lorry-mounted crane presumably was an independently operated crane lorry from had nothing to do with the council. So I'm just kind of wondering about all this, you know, the things you're putting in place, when actually what we need to do is make sure that the vehicles that come onto the harbour have been suitably passed for health and safety with all their equipment and everything, and that it's not actually up to us to pay out, to charge more for use of the harbour just because some clots come in with a lorry that isn't safe. You know, all these things you put in, that the name of the harbour staff dealing with the lift request, stronger advice on wearing the proper gear, a named member of staff on site, an actual lift plan, a named person. They don't require additional resources. That's a 2-minute job of writing some names down. I don't see quite why you've got to increase a charge for future crane operations just because of that.
Okay, just dealing with the first point in terms of the barriers, it is certainly not my recollection that there was any intention that the vehicle barriers would be ever opened on a long-term basis for vehicles accessing, private vehicles accessing the harbour. That was never my understanding. We've discussed this with the operations side who operate this harbour, and since the barriers have been in place, the comment back from Peter, and I use Peter because it's simple because he's retired, so he's not here to defend himself, but the comment back from Peter is he wished he'd done it years ago. It's made the harbour much, much safer in terms of vehicles accessing it, whether there's boats there or not. When you have fishermen working on the harbour and their nets are driven across by people who have got board waiting to go round, then that's the kind of thing that is not ideal for health and safety.
Then just can we deal with that? Because don't be horrible to the bearer of bad news. I mean, I'm just coming back from the community council, and that was what they felt they had agreed to. And if that's not the case, I need you to write to them and explain what was agreed and where the decision was made, because they are absolutely under the impression that somebody has come in and just put the barriers down, and it's not ever been a decision that was being made in committee or anywhere else. And I need you to sort that out for me, because it's going to gather momentum if you're not careful. Okay, so if that's what we agreed. I don't think that is what we agreed personally. I thought it was a bit more flexible, but if you've got the committee papers and the decisions, then that's absolutely fine. But I need you to let the community council know. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I believe the community council, I believe the harbour master has written to the community council advising them that the barriers will.
Not last week, they hadn't. And if he's just retired, then that won't be happening, will it? So I need you to do it. I would really ask Chairman that Alistair, I'd really ask that we do that, please.
Yeah, I mean, with respect to the charges, I think there has been quite a lot of. I think the incident that happened at Kirkcudbright Harbour was probably a little bit of I wouldn't say a wake-up call, but charging for this kind of thing is an appropriate way forward for such an operation in the harbour. I'm not expecting our operations staff to check on the condition of vehicles that come in, but yes, they do need to have signed off. The vehicle failed. That, to me, is a perfect example of health and safety and why we should be keeping the harbour as separate from the public in a lot of respects. But no, I think charging and recovering the charges for something that we've probably been given for free in the past and hasn't been reflected in actually the input from staff. So this has drawn our attention to the fact that supervising lifting operations or other operations that are undertaken in the harbour, and specifically like that, it's not unreasonable to now realise that there is cost for our staff to attend these, to make sure that the right people are turning up, and to manage those costs at the harbour. I mean, this is a commercial operation.
Is that not what a harbour master's job is, to be there when there is activity going on in the harbour? I don't quite understand why it's extra. If you knew there was if you had a harbour master there or assistant harbour master, and he knew there was going to be there was scheduled to be a boat lifting thing going on in the harbour, I would have thought that part of his job would have been to be there to oversee it. I'm just quite surprised you've got to charge extra for having somebody there to do that.
We may have to disagree on that matter. I think a lifting operation is a reasonably unusual operation for the harbour master. It's and particularly lifting in of a boat, which this was. I don't think it's unreasonable. There's a certain level of attendance at the harbour that's expected, but ensuring that the correct paperwork is completed, that the right people are signing up and accepting responsibility for the lifting operations and such like. I don't think that's unreasonable that the council should recuperate some of their costs associated with that. It's not, we're not looking at a vast sums of money, I suspect, for this work, but I think it's not an unreasonable thing to manage. The cost of maintaining that harbour and running that harbour is substantial to the authority.
I think the important thing here, members, is that as members, you are the duty holders for each of our harbours. And I think what we are giving you here is the best professional advice to protect yourselves as the duty holders. Health and safety, if anything goes wrong, the Health and Safety Executive will look at the management and the way we run the harbour. Have we got safe working practices? Have we done everything practicably possible to make the situation safe? And again, this is a professional view to the committee that we feel this is the best way forward. But I acknowledge questions and understand why you're asking.
I would just say that I should have thought it was, or expected it to be part of a harbour master's duty to be there when there is extraordinary lifting things going on, and it should not be an extra.
Can I just come back on it? I think, okay, I'll take that. I'll take that as a fair point. What I will put in our defence is that over the last year and a half, members will remember that last July we undertook training for this committee as duty holders under the Port Marine Safety Code. We've also undertaken quite a lot of work as set out in this report to ensure that we endeavour as best as possible to comply with the Port Marine Safety Code, so we can advise the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency, the MCA, accordingly. What's that addressed? What that's shown to us is that we have a distance to go to be compliant with the Port Marine Safety Code, and flagging up things like lifting operations and realising that in the past, yes, Peter's wandered down there. He's turned up at 3 o'clock in the morning to see a fishing vessel come in. He's come down there at 5 o'clock on a Sunday to see a lifting operation. And that's been done out of the, because Peter was a decent guy. And I think we now need, having gone through the works on the Port Marine Safety Code and compliance with and trying to comply with the Port Marine Safety Code, we need to ensure our house is in order so that as a committee, as the duty holders under the Port Marine Safety Code, you are confident that our officers are managing the harbour as safely as possible. And maybe that charge is an example of actually trying to get our house more in order than it has been in terms of reflecting the cost that it does for our authority to comply, to be passed on to the people benefiting from getting to lift their boat in.
We'll bring in Ian and then Alistair.
Thanks, Chairman. I just think if, as far as 2.4 is concerned, I don't see why we should be referring that to ad hoc. I think we should just agree that personally. I think we should just think we've got that remit, we've got that degree of delegation to us. We should just agree. We do have a subcommittee of this committee in regards to that, and I would agree with the rest of the recommendations, Chairman. The reason I'm saying that is because, as you referred to earlier, with a meeting of the ad hoc review of schemes of delegations and standing orders last week, there's a report coming to full council. I don't think this will make the full council date unless it does. But if this isn't reflected because the review of schemes of delegations committee hasn't actually seen it, let's just make the decision. We've got the delegation here and just move on.
I think the first point to make is that obviously only full council can determine whether you establish a subcommittee. The ad hoc subcommittee for the review of schemes is currently obviously undertaking a full review of the committee structure as part of the reshaping of the council. Hence the reason why it's obviously suggested that it goes to them for consideration as part of that wider piece of work. But even when the ad hoc subcommittee consider the matter, a report will have to go to full council for them to make the decision. We don't have the authority as a committee to set up a subcommittee. We require the authority of full council to do that. So ultimately a report will have to go to full council. The reason it's suggested is it goes to ad hoc subcommittee at the moment is because they're carrying out a review of the whole committee structure, and this should be considered as part of that particular review. Can it be, for example, part of another committee, depending on what the actual recommendation is of the ad hoc subcommittee review of schemes? So we don't have the authority to make that decision, basically. And we could send it straight to full council if you wish, but I think it makes sense that the ad hoc subcommittee, as part of their wider work, considers the matter as well.
I'd be more than happy with that. I don't think there's any reason to delay it, and I apologise. My understanding was that we'd have that degree of authority as a committee.
I'm sure we could get that taking place as quickly as possible. Alistair?
Thanks, Chair. I've no problems whatsoever, as I say, with adopting the recommendations either. I do take very much the points you've just made in relation to the referral of the matter to the ad hoc subcommittee. I would like to think, sir, it would be done sooner rather than later. I would go to the top of page 400, Chair, paragraph 3.2. With all due respect and without causing Alistair Speedy any embarrassment, members agreed that the Director of Planning and Environment Services would be absolved of his duties as designated person, and that this role would be fulfilled by an independent person. The blunt fact of the matter, Chair, is that there's nobody to absolve the members of this committee, or indeed the subcommittee, from their duties and responsibilities. And that's why it's absolutely essential and imperative that we make sure, in fact, that all the boxes are ticked, or whatever the idiom, the correct form of the idiom is, and that we make sure, in fact, if we're ever challenged, that we can show that we've done everything that can be reasonably expected of us. That way, it endeavours at least to try to keep us secure in our capacity and our function, our role as elected members. Chair, this authority, over the 16 and a bit years that I have been a member of it, blithely parachutes elected members into external organisations and whatever, and it never provides them at the end of the day, in my view, or it very rarely provides them at the end of the day, in my view, with the adequate support. And, you know, I often think, you know, really, are we aware sometimes of the risks that we undertake, you know, as elected members and, you know, carrying out public service in Dumfries and Galloway? And this is one area, you know, standing what's already happened in Kirkcudbright, you know, that this is one area where, in my view, we've got to err very much on the side of caution, Chair. I'm grateful to you. It's been a long, hard day. Thank you.
Well made point, Alistair. Sounded like a good pitch to be chairman of the Harbour Subcommittee when it comes along, I have to say. However, we'll wait for the consideration of the ad hoc subcommittee first as to whether we're going to have one, but we'll bear that in mind. But I think the point's valid. Okay, members, can we turn to the recommendations? Are members happy to note 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4? Yeah, sorry.
Forgive me, I'm not going to say it's semantic. I think you know what's coming. 2.3, can we note and approve the work that's been undertaken to achieve compliance, please?
Absolutely. Members happy with that? Yeah. Okay. 2.4, happy. Yeah. 2.5, 2.6 to agree. 2.7 to note. 2.8 to note. And 2.9 to note. Okay, thank you very much, members. Okay, can we turn to item number 12, which is to provide members with details of the post-implementation review of the curbside waste collection service in the Wigtownshire area.
Chair, could I raise a point of order, please, under 16.1, responsibility for preparation of agendas and papers for a meeting resting with the appropriate proper officer and reports only being submitted to the Council or Committee after full consultation. I don't believe this report fulfils that. I think it fails to discharge all of its objectives. There's deficiencies in information and significant omissions. Second thing is, I received my electronic copy on Friday. The reason was given that it was a highly complex issue, which gave me one working day to consider this report. And given the significance, I would move that another meeting, a single item agenda meeting, be set for to consider this item alone, and giving members appropriate time to scrutinise this report.
Finlay, yeah.
Can I suggest that's a special meeting of the full council?
First of all, full council will have to withdraw delegation first, and there's no guarantee they would do that. And I don't know how you call a special meeting of full council as a committee. Well, that's clear, to give us some governance advice on that.
Chair, this committee is delegated to deal with these issues, and we'd be, giving away our delegation if you want a responsibility to do so.
The one concern I've got is that contained within the recommendations here is to give authority to carry out what I think is a very substantial piece of work that needs to be carried out, I think, as a matter of urgency, which is around dealing with some of the costs in the Wigtownshire rollout, and I'm concerned that we delay that process. But I'm in the hands of members. I don't know how long it take to actually call a special meeting. I'm quite happy to have a recess for members to consider the paper, but I would have thought trying to delay. I mean, I have issues around some of the content of this report and where we are with the particular rollout, and I want to see work carried out as soon as possible to bring some of those costs back under control, frankly. And I'm slightly concerned about the suggestion that we should delay that discussion. But I'm open to members. Ian?
I think just picking up on the standing order in particular, one working day, I think Ian's put forward, that's legitimate. I think we should comply with 3, just to get clarification on that. If we're going to, only clarification on that if anybody's otherwise minded and others to consider it today. If not, I don't need clarification. But the other point is we do have a meeting on the full council 29th of September. This report's ready to roll. It could be considered at that meeting. Leaders here, it's his discretion. So, I mean, certainly we could, it's only a 2-week delay. It's no much. It's no, then that's fair enough. It'll be later. And I think Colin's made a valid point in regards to, when I say Colin, I mean the chairman, I mean, he's made a valid point in regards to this needs to be looked at and discussed and decisions made, because there's negative connotations in regards to financial pressure for the council and the delivery of service. So the run, this should have been delivered a year and a half ago. We're 2.5 years into what we thought was going to take us a year. There's not really been a lot of criticism because we understand the level of pressure that's on the council when it comes to delivering this. So it needs another 2 weeks. I think it's got to make a lot of difference in it to bring it forward to the full council if that's the proper place to bring it. But I'm happy enough for a special meeting of this committee actually to be actually your discretion, Chairman. I'm neither up nor down, but I'm okay with delaying it for a short amount of time, a week or a fortnight.
Well, an emergency meeting, obviously, the committee can be obviously agreed, but obviously an emergency meeting of the council would have to require, I think about, was it 25% of members to ask for that, then has to take place within 14 days, and I think we've got further delays around that. So I'd be very concerned about taking that forward. I mean, do members actually wish to consider the report and then decide whether or not there are further actions that are required, including further discussions, or do you just simply want to delay it completely? George?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't just catch what you were saying there.
It's clear just to outline what's required to have a special meeting of full council, and then what's the difference between having a special meeting of the committee and special meeting of full council.
Have a special meeting, emergency meeting of the council if the proper officer, if the leader deems that there's items of business that require it. But a special meeting can be called if the proper officer receives 1/4 of members requesting it, and that's to be held within 14 days. So the difference being that the leader decides that there's going to be an emergency meeting, as opposed to members, 1/4 of the members deciding there's enough, business to be transacted that requires a special meeting.
Given that this committee has a delegation rather than full council, I would have thought that it's this committee would have to deal with it. Finlay?
Chair, I just feel that this is such a significant issue. We've had very little time to consider the reports and implications, and I think it actually puts the council at risk. I think it's an issue that is right across the region, and every member needs to take a part in scrutinising this report. And so I think it's important that we do delegate, our full council can remove delegation for this committee, and it's considered at full council.
That would have to be a special meeting of full council then.
Sorry, Chairman, wouldn't it really, because the leader at his discretion, he has said no, but leader at his discretion could put it on the agenda on the 29th, which is a...
With all due respect, we don't have as a committee, we don't make the decisions of the leader. This committee has delegation. We're not going to start making decisions based on what the leader may or may not decide to do at a future date, but I think it's made absolutely clear this committee has delegation, so I think you can make your own mind up there. Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I would be perfectly happy to go for deferment, and for a one-item meeting of this committee, there are several things that are important that are missing in terms of the costs. There's temporary costs for the residual waste still going to the Gardner instead of going to the zero waste part.
We're actually starting to now debate the report, and I think that's the issue. I think if there's additional information that members want to see, then we debate the report and we ask for a further report on that additional information. But we can't start debating what additional information we want if we're still actually having a discussion as to whether you actually want to debate the report or not. My preference, I have to say, is actually debate the report, and if they believe there are issues that are not resolved in this report, that we actually ask for that additional information. I don't think actually saying we're not going to discuss the report and then we can all speculate what's missing. Unless we actually debate the report, then you're not going to have an opportunity to say what's missing. Ian?
If I could just reiterate, part of the reason I was asking for a single item on my agenda was the fact that we didn't get this until Friday. It's a highly complex issue. I perfectly accept that, and it requires appropriate time for members to scrutinise before we come to an informed debate. And at that point, I think members will have had enough time to work out what they feel is omitted or have any further information that they need.
Yeah, I mean, I'm quite happy to defer it, but I think the difficulty I've got is that obviously we'll then have a debate as to what information is missing and then have to get another report after that. And that's my concern I've got, I have to say. You know, we either discuss it and get the additional information, have a further report, or we simply take the report off the table and convene another meeting. There are two separate issues here. There's the issue about having members having sufficient time to actually read the report and what additional information you want. And you can't start debating what additional information you want if you don't even want to debate the report. Jim, do you want to comment?
Debate it today, that's fine. But if it's got to be deferred, then it should be this committee that deals with it. And the other thing is, there should never be a paper come to this committee so late that we're forced to debate it because of the implication, whether it be financial or management issues. I've raised that before. We should always have these papers in time so any decision we might make will not impact adversely on the council. So I'm happy to debate it today, but if it's going to be deferred, it should be this committee absolutely that determines it. We shouldn't be absolving ourselves of any responsibility.
Yes, members, I'd like to put on record my apologies for the lateness of this report. I take full responsibility for that. It was because of a number of issues, and as I say, my sincere apologies that you received it late.
Okay, we have a motion from Councillor Dick, which is to obviously defer the item and have a meeting of this committee, am I right in saying, to consider the matter. Do we have a seconder for that particular motion? Yeah, happy to do that. Do members have any other view on the matter? Okay, so a single item meeting of this committee to discuss the report that's before us as soon as March. Finlay?
Chair, I just wonder whether we suggest that meeting should be confidential, because I think members will want to discuss some of the details of the contract we have with.
Just say it's up to the proper officer to determine whether or not it's confidential. Clearly, it's been determined the information within this report does not require it to be an exempt item. That's up to the proper officer to do that. I think there are future reports that are recommended that may require that, but certainly not this report before us. Okay, members, I don't have any further business. Thank you for your attendance.